Okay.
Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, April 22nd at 9 a.m., and I will call this Early Learning Council meeting to order. Gabby, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Bear with me 1 second. I accidentally closed out of my document. Okay. So for the roll, okay. Chair Farrar Campbell is present. Katie Brooks is also running just a little bit late, but she should be here. Peter Buckley will be joining at around 10:30. Robin Hill Dunbar.
Here.
Eric Hunter is excused today. Dr. Peg Miller.
Here.
Subin O.
Here.
Ruby Ramirez will also be joining a little bit late today, and Marie Simons.
Here.
Perfect. Thank you. We have a quorum, Chair.
All right. And was there any public comment?
There was no public comment submitted for today's meeting.
Okay. We'll move on. Before we get into the bulk of the meeting, I just wanted, you guys all saw in your packet that the governor has declared this week, actually, home visiting week. And as you all know, that is one of our home visiting is one of our priorities. The tremendous work that home visitors do and the impact that they have on maternal and child health. And so, just very excited that the governor proclaimed this home visiting week for the second year in a row. And hopefully, this helps spread awareness amongst the public about the importance of our home visitors in our early childhood system. So, excited about that.
Yeah.
Uh,
And Liz,
Anything
I have
else?
a couple, sorry, I was going to say, I have a couple talking points if you wouldn't mind, just around our three DELC programs. Just really want
Yeah.
to acknowledge that I know that there's uh, several different home visiting programs across DELC, OHA, and ODHS. So just really think that it's important to acknowledge all of the programs. But just wanted to take a second to really just acknowledge the Oregon Prenatal to Kindergarten program, Relief Nurseries, and Healthy Families Oregon. All three of these programs provide family-centered home visiting that strengthen child development, family stability, and parent-child relationships. With OPK, all slots actually receive family home visiting services from home visitors. And home visitors within this program are usually referred to as family support specialists or family advocates. And these home visits actually function more like a parent teacher conference as opposed to the more traditional educational home visits. They support families with well-being, crisis needs, and personal goal setting with things like higher education, applying for jobs, or becoming proficient in English. And also just a fun fact that many current staff were actually former program parents, which is also really exciting. And one other note that programs wanted me to highlight in regards to OPK is just pretty impressive program through the Community Action Team in Washington County that actually works with incarcerated mothers and resources families at Coffee Creek Correction Facility. And they provide home visiting to the resources or foster families while supporting the bond between the incarcerated mother, her child, and their family. And then I think this group is likely more familiar with Healthy Families Oregon. Uh, it's a voluntary home visiting program, free to families, provides personalized support to families across the state. It also just strengthens parent and child relationships, supports healthy child development, and really just promotes the overall well-being. The program has, proven to show positive outcomes in child safety, maternal and child health, economic stability, parent and child interaction, child development, and school readiness. And also just a quick plug that last year in 2025, HFO actually served 2,156 families in Oregon and completed over 30,000 home visits. And lastly, Relief Nurseries, again, just another great home visiting program. Um, Family-centered home visiting, again, also focused on healthy child development, uses parent education at its core. In addition to offered home visits, they have group classes as well. and also offer outreach that helps families meet urgent needs, stability crises, and improve child safety. So I just wanted to take a second to acknowledge the three programs within DELC. Again, realize that there are several other programs within OHA and ODHS, and going through all of them would probably take several meetings, but just really want to take the time to acknowledge just all the great work that our home visitors and that the home visiting programs in our state are doing.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love more of the detail about how some of those programs are showing up in communities. So thank you for providing that as well. Well, Council, I think we'll move into the sort of crux of our agenda, which it's a childcare meeting again today. And so we're going to be talking to some more folks from different states to learn how they're engaging businesses in their states and giving us some different models. As you all remember, we heard from Allie Richards in Vermont a couple of months ago. We heard from Nicole Reel out in Colorado. And then, of course, the National Chamber a couple of meetings back. And so this time we have invited folks from Pennsylvania and from Virginia. And so I'll have some questions for each of our panelists, and then we'll leave plenty of time for some questions from the council to engage. So first, the two that we have invited are Andrea Heberlein, who's the executive director from Pennsylvania's Early Learning Investment Commission, and then Kathy Glazer, who's the president of the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation. Andrea and Kathy, could you just take a minute and introduce yourselves before we dive in?
Sure, I'll just go first because I think I was quicker on the unmute. But it is my pleasure to be here. I'm Andrea Heberlein. I'm the executive director of the Pennsylvania Early Learning Investment Commission. I have served in this role since the very end of 2019, which, as we all know, triggers that, right before the pandemic. So I'm really pleased to be able to share with you a little bit how, that timing really helped inform some of our current strategies that we are embracing today. So I'm very, very pleased to be here.
And I'm Kathy Glazer, president of the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation. Been at this work a very long time, and excited to share a little bit about what we've learned in Virginia about our trajectory of working with the business community, and anything that we can share over and offer as suggestions. Happy to do it, and also glad to learn from you all today and from Andrea. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I think I'll start in Pennsylvania with Andrea, and let's just do some background, some grounding. When was the Early Learning Investment Commission established? How has that business engagement strategy evolved from where it started to where you are today?
Sure, absolutely. So the Pennsylvania Early Learning Investment Commission, or I'll just call it the Commission, was founded in 2007. And so this was under Governor Rendell's administration. And I always like to say this is really when Pennsylvania was getting momentum around connecting kind of the education, the early childhood education of childcare with kind of the regulations and the health and safety. And so many things like our pre-K counts, our income eligible free pre-kindergarten program, tying childcare subsidy to quality, all of that was really taking off. And it was really, I think, the insight of the leadership at that time to recognize if we wanted sustainability and we wanted growth, we really needed to engage the business leaders across the Commonwealth to really help them understand how critically important, early childhood education is delivered through quality childcare, both for today and in the future. And so with that, we were created by executive order. We have existed under 3 administrations. And with our current administration, Governor Shapiro actually appointed our Lieutenant Governor, Austin Davis, to serve as our co-chair. alongside a private sector leader at PNC Bank. So really, we now look to that public-private partnership model to guide the work that we do. And we have about 50 senior level business leaders who are appointed by the governor across the Commonwealth who, are very well versed in kind of the return on investment and, the whys behind this work. And we are, and I'll talk about that a little bit, like really kind of pushing now to understanding how they can make a big difference, not only in their own bricks and mortar, but in their communities and across the state.
Wonderful. So it's a government-based then organization.
Yes, but we are not a .gov. We actually are funded through philanthropy and corporate contributions. And so while we are kind of a quasi-governmental commission, we, again, I don't receive any money from the government.
Got it. So when did your current strategy launch, and who authorizes or governs the strategy? How does that governance work?
Sure. So really in the beginning years of the commission, up until kind of right before I began, I would say the commission was heavily focused on awareness and advocacy and really working in partnership with our advocacy organizations who do fantastic work in like gathering data, identifying gaps, really making recommendations for those investments to come out of the general fund. And so we were really aligned in much of that work, just really lifting up the business voice in doing that. I would say our strategy began to really shift during the pandemic when all of a sudden, we so well versed again in kind of the longitudinal benefits of high quality early learning. And that's really what we were kind of putting the stake in the ground. But the pandemic, as we know, really kind of illuminated, yes, what we kind of all have known is that childcare is so critically important for the workforce, and employers are feeling really the brunt of that. So in 2022, we partnered with the Pennsylvania Chamber to do a statewide survey of employers, really gauging the impact of the pandemic on the workforce as it relates to childcare. And honestly, Liz, most of the findings were not like, oh, we had no idea. Like we knew that, over half of the businesses were attributing childcare as like a primary reason why their workforce wasn't coming back or they were leaving. And so we knew that. But what was kind of the aha moment is that employers really indicated that they wanted to do a better job of helping their workforce. They just didn't know how. And it was like this aha moment when all of a sudden we realized that we have a really good opportunity to kind of move beyond like living in the problem and start really focusing on solutions, both at like the very like individual company level, but also moving it to like the community and statewide level. So when kind of why childcare matters, but then here's what we can do about it.
Great. And since you've stepped into the role, obviously there's been some big things happening with the pandemic and all. Are there specific actions or initiatives that have led you to advance the work?
Sure. And I should say, I think I might have skipped this part too. I will say that I also have an executive committee that really helps kind of with the governance and the accountability. And it was with their insight and guidance and also with really the approval of the Shapiro Davis administration that we launched what we were calling our innovation project. And this was in 2024, kind of bled into 2025 a little bit. And we were really driven by, how do we reimagine the childcare business model? Because we say it's broken, but it never was right. So it's inherently flawed. And how do we, fix it? And we came to like where it might sound like a silly thing, but it was really able to center us on we have to figure out how to drive new recurring and substantial revenue into the child care system. And what we have been doing for decades of having asks come primarily out of the general fund is only funding a sliver of what we need to truly have a robust and vibrant community-based system. And so with our innovation project, again, we're working very closely with the governor's policy office, and certainly the lieutenant governor is a big piece of this. It has helped us look at our work within kind of four pillars of work. Employer-driven strategies, and we're really kind of digging in with a toolkit, even at the very most fundamental level, called Investments in Caring PA, that allows employers to understand that when we say investing in childcare, it doesn't mean that you need to open an on-site childcare center. And so it provides kind of a range, a continuum of ways that employers can really get involved and help, everything from awareness to their own benefits they're offering, to partnering with childcare, into advocacy and technical assistance. So that is one way of kind of meeting employers where they are. It also gives us a great opportunity to lift up great examples of innovation happening across Pennsylvania, as hopefully like to inspire, or, hey, if they're doing it, we can do it. We also focus really strongly on funding, financing, and fundraising. And this is where we have honed in on an opportunity at the federal level with the employer provided child care tax credit, 45F, as providing an on-ramp to employer engagement. I think we have heard, oh, it's too expensive, there's backup, like it's not fair if I offer this. And we're really making headway, but now understanding that there is kind of a really good financial incentive for employers doing more. Under this as well, we are also, thank goodness, starting to have the administration explore what dedicated revenue for childcare will look like, beyond just, the general fund. Where can we really work to create predictable revenue that is coming hopefully from multiple sources that's feeding the childcare system? So more to come on that. We also have made great progress at looking at how can we leverage other existing dollars into the childcare system through win-wins across state government. And so that's what I'm all about, the win-win. And we all know that when you are focusing on housing or workforce development or health, those initiatives that intentionally include childcare create better outcomes for the original objective, right? And so as a result, we have had what the Shapiro-Davis administration is calling a whole of government approach, in which different agencies beyond education and DHS are looking at that intentional inclusion of childcare. So like the Department of DCED, which is our Community and Economic Development, they are now prioritizing grants to communities that include childcare. DGS, which does kind of they're like the real estate broker of the state, they are looking at underutilized properties and how we can overlay that with childcare deserts and see if there's an opportunity to use that bricks and mortar to expand scope and scale. And I could go on about that, but I'm being conscious of my time. But the fourth pillar that we're working on is communications and marketing, knowing that we have got to do some intentional shifting of the way that we talk about childcare and overcome some of those biases, like it's a social service, it's a charity, to it truly is economic infrastructure. And if it is economic infrastructure, how can we creatively pull in dollars to fund it as such? And so, so that is really what we are digging into currently, and how that has kind of changed just from, advocacy and lifting up our voices.
That sounds so exciting. I love the idea of having multiple agencies coming at it and not limiting it to just one or two.
Yeah, and so when we think about childcare's economic infrastructure, have been learning a lot about how, the private sector funds things and like capital stacks, right? And so how do we take employer investment layered with the public investment, layered with, the financing available through CDFIs, available from local state grants to philanthropy. I think when we have the tools, if we can orchestrate and bring them together, we are really being able to create a much more financially stable field.
Incredible. So can we maybe dig a little bit deeper into the commission's work?
Sure.
What's the core purpose of the work? How is it funded? You kind of talked a little bit about
Yeah.
the partnership between
Yep.
philanthropy and business. Are there funding mechanisms or partnerships that make this possible? How, for
Yeah.
instance, did businesses come on board to fund it? What's the mix between philanthropy and
Yeah.
business, and how does that look?
So I pulled this directly from our executive order. Okay, so I'm reading this verbatim. The purpose of the commission is to secure support for public and private sector investment in early learning by focusing on practices that are educationally, economically, and scientifically sound. And then our number one kind of responsibility under that is to develop a plan and implementation strategy to stabilize the childcare workforce and increase access to affordable, available, and quality childcare for all Pennsylvania children, regardless of income. So, like, oh, easy. I'm on it. Check. But no, this is, I mean, so this is our order, and this is the kind of our marching orders. And it's so funny you kind of talk about the funding, because right around that same time in 2019, we were also, brand new, and here I have some of our foundational funders saying, listen, we love the work that's happening, but we've been funding this for like over a decade. Like, it is time for you to diversify funding. We don't do entitlement. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. I'm on it. And so we were really able to dig right into our commissioner base, right? If you are truly vested in this work, we no longer have like the robust philanthropic support that we have had in the past. Are you willing to make a financial contribution? And, it was yes, was the answer. And so as a result, about 25% of our budget is funded by our commissioners through corporate contributions or through personal gifts. And then the remainder, as you will not be surprised, is a variety of, philanthropic grants. And we spend a lot of time fundraising and trying to find those fits for our that really work well within our mission.
Got it. What strategies, I'm curious, helped you shift businesses from being advocates to becoming direct investors? You talked about, in
Yeah.
the survey, that sort of popped out, but how did you get
Yeah.
businesses to actually move in that direction and see the business case for making those investments?
Well, I think that we've done a great job in helping them see the business case. Now the next thing is getting to move to action, and we're really kind of building upon that momentum. And like I said, I think there's some levers that exist now that haven't existed in the past. But I think what we have learned as being effective strategies is really, translating the problem into business terms. Like, capital stack is not something that naturally flows off of my tongue, but that's exactly the way that the private sector views, infrastructure projects, really kind of thinking about it in terms like that, helping them really grasp kind of the workforce participation. I mean, we even look in Pennsylvania, we have a huge problem with out migration and brain drain and population decline. There are ways in which we can really craft this that resonates with business leaders across the Commonwealth, as certainly the talent pipeline, lowering the barrier to entry, and that's where again I think Investments in Caring PA does a really good job. I can't tell you how many times I've said to a business leader like, hey, does your HR department even understand what the eligibility requirements are for our state funded programs? Like, a lot of entry level workers would be qualified, but yet we have a problem where we're not filling pre-K count slots. It's not like there's not need, it's just there's this awareness thing. So being able to work with a variety of different ways, obviously getting, from low-hanging fruit to like more intense, showing the peers that are doing the work, again, the power of comparison, and unbundling solutions, I think. I think that employers like kind of having something that's almost like ready to go, almost like turnkey, and trying to help meet them where they are when it comes to solutions.
What are you most proud of in this work, and what lessons have you learned so far in your role?
Well, I would say that we are most proud about really taking the lead on looking at some innovative solutions beyond what has traditionally been done. Absolutely. We're so grateful and proud, but we're just making these little incremental movements ahead. And we're right now, like we're ready for something big in Pennsylvania, big and bold. And so I'm really proud that we're able to take the lead on that. I'm really proud about the way that we are getting the Shapiro Davis administration to look beyond just the traditional agencies and think about the bigger picture of how I always say my superpower. Give me any problem, I'll take it back to early childhood education. Like I just can do that. And I guess I'm making some headway there. And then, really leaping into this shared investment. Again, we don't know, but we're forging ahead because I think it really only makes sense, and it really, to me, is one of the only viable solutions that's going to create that level of revenue and support to create sustainable community-based organizations. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned is, I think that being able to speak the business speak, I think is really important. Having the business leaders be able to speak to their colleagues using that type of language, I think is really important. I think the biggest lesson I'm trying to learn is just you just keep on putting one foot in front of the other, and hopefully we'll get there. I feel optimistic.
That's wonderful. Um, Thank you for sharing all of this. Council, I know you probably have 1,000 questions to ask, so we'll ask Andrea to stay with us, but I want to also hear sort of what's happening in Virginia, and then we'll open it up for questions for both Andrea and Kathy. So Kathy, I'll move over to you. Can you, I think, ground as well in what's happening in Virginia. How did your business engagement strategy in Virginia start? What drove the state of Virginia to start this work? Sort of how does that look in your state?
Thank you. Excited to have a chance to share our history. And Andrea gave a hard act to follow, so I'm going to try to live up to the expectations that she's raised for you all. I would say that our business strategy began really at the very beginning as inception of the creation of the Virginia Early Childhood Foundation more than 20 years ago. It's been a long arc of partnership and intentional cultivation of that partnership. Around 2005, under Governor Mark Warner, we created a council that was led by two business executives. This was not a government or a legislatively created council. It was kind of one of my first jobs as part of a role within Governor Warner's administration, where he wanted to make sure and make good on some of the promises around early childhood that he had talked about in his campaign. And he was coming to the conclusion of his term and really wanted to see something move. And so we started the process by bringing together this council that was led again by two business executives, one of whom was Governor Warner's best friend, and was very compelled by a number of factors and dynamics in Virginia to lead the initiative. And the goal of the council, which included business leaders as well as the policy directors of the three gubernatorial candidates during the 6-month phase of time that the council did its work, to bring recommendations requested by Governor Warner himself, a successful business person to build an early childhood movement in Virginia. The work was influenced really by two factors. One, foundationally, the brain science that shows the imperative of supporting optimal development of human capacity from the very beginning. This was guided by interest in the time at the Neurons to Neighborhood edited book that Jack Shonkoff brought together, and then James Heckman's productivity argument. The Virginia business executives recognize the value of investment of attention, policy, will, and resources in young children for the formation of all future human capacity, workforce talent, and economic vitality and quality of life priorities for the Commonwealth. And then secondly, on a strategic nature, Virginia is the only state that limits its governors to one consecutive 4-year term. And so we recognized at the time the importance of having a foot in the private sector as we had this kind of revolving door in the public sector of all executives of the executive branch changing over every 4 years. And so the recommendation to establish the Early Childhood Foundation as a public-private partnership intermediary to be able to continue that thrust, work with the private sector, especially business leaders, to keep the drumbeat around our vision and sort of goals around early childhood development. And I would say that the foundation's board has, again, since 2005, been led by business executives and includes 3 cabinet members from the administration and ex officio roles to keep that, kind of that balance of public and private working together on our goals together. We also have enjoyed and really appreciated this very long partnership with our State Chamber of Commerce, including an annual event that we co-host together called the Executive Briefing on the Economics of Early Childhood. And so every year we convene generally a legislative and a business group to hear about the latest, what's going on, where the investments are, where there are gaps in early childhood development, impact that's having on the economy and the workforce and the talent development in the state. And that's just been a tremendous platform for us to continue this conversation in a very public way. The Virginia Chamber also does a process that's called the Blueprint, which is the state's economic competitiveness plan, every few years, and really looks out at the ways that has events at every local and regional chamber in the state to get feedback on what are the key issues, what are you experiencing in your region that help lead to a strong workforce and strong economy. What are the primary issues that you're concerned about? And year over year, that process has found that childcare has been a really critical issue from the very beginning. So whenever we have a new copy of the Blueprint, this economic competitiveness plan, there are about 8 pillars of importance. And number 1 is education and workforce. The very first page has all of the recommendations and all of the priorities around early childhood care and education. So that has been a really important document for our state that puts childcare as an important economic and infrastructure and workforce issue on the map, as well as a school readiness issue for young children.
That's incredible. Yeah, we have a Prosperity Council that is at work now, and I am hopeful that their results will also show that childcare is showing up in community feedback in that plan. So
I bet it will.
Yeah. Can you talk to us a little bit about your current strategy? When did it launch, and who authorizes and governs sort of the strategy?
Sure. I am going to be talking about 2 different strategies, and so bear with me. One is sort of public facing and one is more private facing. First is the Early Childhood Care and Education Commission, and secondly, I'll be talking about the Virginia Business Roundtable for Early Education. They were both born out of the pandemic era. And both also leverage the heightened visibility of early childhood care and education, or child care, for business and workforce development. I'm sure every state experienced this of, oh my gosh, like everything's closed. How are we going to get our essential workers online? And then, ultimately, how are we going to use this disruption to really generate a new reimagining of how we're going to, have our focus on our childcare system. So the Early Childhood Commission began work with our conversations with a key legislator and appropriator who worked with us, and she called together, convened, and led a work group. And the members of that work group saw the value of a legislatively created commission. And so we worked with her over a number of different months, convening the conversation, talking about this issue of childcare, relating it to the needs of, the state, importance of the General Assemblies, understanding the administration, the business community, etc. We were able to work very closely with her on the language for the bill and the concept, and ultimately, with her strong championing, the bill passed that charged the commission that would be led by or convened by the Secretary of Education and the Secretary of Labor to focus on the financing of early childhood care and education in Virginia. So it was really specific to how do we make sure investments are made to build a system that we know is needed, to resolve the issues and kind of address the gaps that we have. The commission includes 4 Senate and 5 House members. It's chaired by a legislator and vice chaired by a business executive. So populated by legislators, some members of the administration, business leaders, and then some both public and private representatives of early childhood care and education. Let's see. There are several annual reports due with recommendations and considerations. Those are delivered to both the governor and then key members of the General Assembly. The foundation, my organization, is charged in the language with supporting and facilitating the work of the commission, which of course helps us guide the agenda and understand what topics to put forward, what data to request from the Department of Education to be made public, those sorts of items. Then I'm going to switch to the private facing side, the Virginia Business Roundtable for Early Education, or sometimes we call it VBRE, which is an advisory committee to the foundation's board of directors. So we placed it there so that it would again be this very sustained and durable and stable foot in the private sector that could transcend that every 4-year turnstile of all the executive leaders in state bureaucracy. This commission, or the roundtable, convenes businesses and employers, economic developers, state, local, regional chambers of commerce, industry associations like the Virginia Hospital and Healthcare Association, or Virginia Restaurant, Lodging, and Travel Association. And then we also make sure that there's representation across every region of Virginia, to make sure that those representatives in each region can, kind of work with and speak to their legislative representation to make sure they understand that every region cares about this. Every region has needs and gaps and assets to bring to this issue. We also utilize the goal, or the mandate, is around leveraging both public and private investment to build the supply of quality childcare and to strengthen the early educator workforce and the stature of the profession, including competitive compensation. The roundtable utilizes a high capacity government relations function, which is deployed to promote the legislative and budget agenda of the organization.
Are there specific actions or initiatives that have led you to advance the work?
Yes, we have, appreciated and really deployed the urgency that we've heard from employers statewide and economic and site developers. And again, motivated by and incorporate the blueprint by the chamber, and then also have been really working closely with our economic development partnership, the state level partnership, and the Economic Developers Association to make sure that childcare is not an afterthought in regional plans or in state level plans, but rather deeply embedded in the infrastructure. So, for example, we're working with planning district commissions across the state to include childcare as part of their SEDS, and that feels like a really important gain and, kind of motivation to kind of keep the work moving forward. I will say that it was really exciting in this most recent legislative session to have a call from our partners at the Hospital and Healthcare Association contact me early on in session to say, for hospital directors across the state, and of course we're dealing with, high costs of healthcare and Medicaid, challenges, et cetera. But they said the director's top concern and priority for the legislative session was accessible childcare. And so this is just like a wake-up call of we really are making tracks with kind of putting these pieces together, utilizing these connections with business to be, loud and proud about advocacy at the General Assembly.
This is so fascinating to me how other states structure this. Thank you so much for sharing this. I have a ton of questions, but I'd like to just maybe dive a little bit deeper into the core purpose of the work, sort of how it's funded. Are there certain mechanisms that allow the work to continue? Are you consistently fundraising? And are there any partnerships that were sort of key to making this sort of longevity that you've had in Virginia?
Absolutely. In terms of funding, one thing that I will say just from the top is that, throughout our trajectory, we have had a mix of public and private funding that support the efforts of the foundation. And we have, through the pandemic, really our budget was inflated and our responsibilities just, quadrupled through the state's request of us to help administer some of the pandemic relief dollars. So we were kind of a third-party administrator to make sure that all the child care stabilization checks out of CARES and then ARPA were delivered, because the state agencies were saying to us, we just can't get the money to folks on the ground, help. And so we took on that responsibility. We also issued checks to every single early childhood educator in publicly funded classrooms across the state, incentive dollars to kind of try to keep them in those classrooms and supported, especially through the pandemic times. We also increased our mixed delivery childcare services program to make sure that, families weren't losing access and could, kind of show up at their jobs. So our budget has been, is more dominated by public dollars at this time, but the private sector funds that we're able to raise, and largely through corporate foundations or community foundations, both national, local, state level, this is sort of the secret sauce that allows us to continue to lean into the innovation space and the accountability space. These are areas of work that the bureaucracy is not known to do well. And so this is what the state has come to know they're going to get from the foundation. And so just will make a statement about that we couldn't do this work well if we didn't have those funders committed and confident in the work that we're doing. For the work of the commission specifically, we also are able to utilize some state general fund dollars that we receive for some flexibility in supporting public-private partnerships and increased childcare across the state. And that helps us defray the costs of some of the commission meetings, the experts and the facilitators that we bring to the table to educate the commission members, facilities, all of that. But otherwise, it's a fairly low cost, activity itself. And then through the Business Roundtable, we're currently using a model that we borrowed from a similar lobby that's been created for higher education, where there's a business partnership with higher education leaders to try to secure more public funding for higher education. So we modeled our roundtable around that, to where the employers and businesses who are part of the delegation, the regional delegations, and our roundtable pay it's actually a charitable contribution toward the expenses of providing this asset and this resource, and those costs help us with the expenses of this really high caliber government relations firm to be able to kind of quarterback the agenda, the legislative and budget agenda of the roundtable.
Great. Have you, Andrea had sort of talked about, in their survey, it popped that businesses were looking to maybe do some more direct investment. Have you seen that in Virginia? Are your businesses mostly comfortable in the advocacy space? Are you also seeing them sort of shift from being advocates to direct investors in childcare solutions? How does that look in Virginia?
I would say it's a both and. We also, like Andrea, we also have done employer surveys, and that's been a partnership between and among the foundation, the state chamber, and our Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, really polling and surveying employers to understand what's the status of your concerns around childcare for your workforce. What are your, what are you currently doing to support your workforce? What would you be interested in doing? What do you need to become more interested? We've done those surveys 2000 in May of 2000, which was a really interesting time, in 2023, and then again last year in 25. So it's been really interesting to see the change over time in business interest in direct contributions. And so what that has looked like, has been more, again, understanding, especially through the pandemic era, the growing interest in business to really directly support their workforce. And so we have seen, continued interest in being a voice and to advocate for. And they've been so effective about that in the General Assembly. And the General Assembly is very interested in the business voice. And so there's sort of this captive audience of, if business leaders, if the, C-suite executives are coming to talk to the General Assembly, and they do consistently, about the need for childcare, that's of course very compelling to them. And they also are saying, okay, we get it that there's a lot of need for childcare. We get it that this is really important for you to have access to a talent pool who also have access to childcare for their young children. You all need to ante up too. So it's been this kind of nice back and forth of, let's see how we can work together to bring this around. So especially through the Business Roundtable efforts, we have been able to support the businesses to understand what are the options that they have. We are, of course, testing out the idea of this sort of cost sharing pilot. We don't call it tri-share, because what we've learned from other states is that tri-share, the concept of 3 equal shares, does not work. So we have a different cost sharing kind of a model that we're testing to see, what will employers put forward, on behalf of their employees for the actual cost? How do we kind of motivate and leverage state investment to be partners with employers for their employees' childcare costs? So numerous ways that we've been able to do that. I will say that, in the early days of the pandemic, business leaders from some of our largest employers called me every day to say, help, like, we don't know anything about childcare. We just know we need it. And I remember the HR exec at Huntington Ingalls, a national corporation that has its largest workforce in Virginia, said that, he had gotten a report that 1,000 employees had called out that day, and that 90% of them called out because they couldn't find childcare for their children. So he's like, this is urgent. We've got to figure out how to, make things work. And so they are always at the table in terms of thinking about what kind of investment can they make as a company? How can they leverage their strong position in the state to kind of also work with the legislature? Their leaders also serve on the Early Childhood Commission, see how things are sort of kind of cut across, and an officer of the Early Childhood Foundation board. So we try to bring these voices together and make sure it's possible. By about 2022, the site developers, economic development, people trying to lure business into Virginia, were calling me on a frequent basis saying, we don't know anything about childcare. We just know in order to lure this business, we need to be able to answer their key questions, which used to be K-12 higher education. Now the two big questions they're asking is, will there be quality childcare? Will there be affordable housing for my employees? So we're, leveraging those opportunities / challenges to try to bring investment together. We also have developed the Business Roundtable Playbook, which gives examples of exemplars where business, government, other, philanthropy have worked together to, expand the supply and the stability of childcare services.
That's exciting. Kathy, what are you most proud of in this work? What key lessons have you learned?
So many that I won't bore you with all the details, but I would say we have really prized this strong partnership with the business community. They've been the most vocal and most effective champions for the work that we're trying to do and promote. And we have had the ability, because of that partnership with them, to really sit at the nexus of public and private, state to local, early childhood systems building, and to be viewed as a trusted broker of bringing together information, insights, motivation to bring folks to the table. We've been really pleased to have been successful, especially in 2024, to be part of the advocacy that led to then Governor Youngkin's $1.1 billion investment, mostly state general funds, in our in subsidized early childhood services, to make sure that about 35,000 children and families did not lose their services when the federal relief dollars expired. So we've seen evidence that working together we can make big advances. Wish it could happen every year, but it is, it's kind of a long game and a marathon. We love to see sprints when they happen, but we're also really excited about our new governor, Spanberger, and her focus on affordability as her agenda, which of course is just a perfect fit for childcare.
Wonderful. Council, time to open it up for questions. Do you have questions for Andrea and Kathy? Or reflections too?
I can just kind of jump in for a second. Oh, Robin, sorry. But I would say I just love how Kathy really brought to light the economic competitiveness conversations that are happening because I think that also is just an important lever. We have a meeting with our early childhood education caucus coming up, and I brought in a leader from the Center for Regional Economic Competitiveness who just wrote a blog on, why childcare is such an important component into that. And he actually references childcare as economic infrastructure too. So it's another lever for sure.
Ruby.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. Super informative and helpful and gives us a lot of hope as well as we move forward with this kind of work here in the state. I do always think about context of different states and what those contextual things are that have impacted your ability to move these ideas forward. And I've been thinking a lot about Oregon as a state is not a state of large businesses or employers. We're mostly small businesses. So I'm wondering what that looks like in each of your states. What kinds of business leaders are participating? Do they tend to be leaders of large corporations? Are we talking medium-sized businesses? Because I don't know what this exact statistic might be. Some of my colleagues might know better, but I think we're, probably like 80% small businesses in Oregon. So just looking for some additional context. Thank you.
I can start and then pop it over to you, Andrea. I think it's a really great question and observation. We do have both, representation actually across small, medium, and large business. And I would just say that our state chamber reminds me frequently that 90% of their members are small business. And so, predominantly the businesses who are engaged at that level and who are raising these issues, at their local and regional levels are small businesses. It's a little harder, I think, for them to have the resources. And in fact, some of our, language around some of the bills that we focus on do point to a kind of a priority for serving small business needs, just to make sure that we're not just, like the big five aren't the ones that always get all of the attention, though they do as well.
Yeah, and it's very similar in Pennsylvania. Like I think it's almost exactly 90% of our businesses are classified as small businesses or medium businesses. And so on the commission, we definitely have it reflects that in the way that our membership is orchestrated. I will also say too that when you think about, the states, Pennsylvania we've got some urban anchors and then we have rural PA in the middle. And so not only do we have small businesses, but we also have situations where when you're thinking about building supply and capacity, it does not look like a childcare center for 150 children, right? It is really looking at those opportunities with home-based childcare providers, small centers. And so there's definitely that component as well. And we really are trying to be very conscious that we are specifically focusing on rural PA because as we know, in many times, those children have greater opportunity to benefit from high quality early learning and their parents with childcare as well. So it looks a little different across the state and contextually, as you brought up, Ruby, it's really important to meet people where they are and employers where they are.
Marie.
Hi, thank you so much. This was very interesting. I think just one quick reflection from what these two were speaking about. It just sounds like there's a really strong tie between your business entities, both sort of maybe private or membership based around your states as well as agency based. And so it just gets me to thinking a little bit about where in Oregon we can make some of those connections. We have a lot of agency heads that sit with us here at Early Learning Council, but unless I'm missing it, we don't have anyone that really represents business. Business Oregon's not at the table. So it feels like there might be an opportunity. I would say too, this conversation is timely based on the work of the more early learning focused council that's been created by the governor as well as the Prosperity Council. And just want to make a note that as my quick Google search tells me, Virginia, it ranks fourth in the nation as one of the best states to have a business, and Pennsylvania is in the top 20. So we know Oregon has some work to do there. And so that sort of um, opportunity for good business growth often, I think, makes these conversations around how businesses can support things like childcare a little bit more easy.
Mhm.
Other questions or reflections from the council?
I guess I will just jump in, and I don't know how much time we have, Liz,
We
but
have
Liz,
another 15 minutes, so please.
okay. Well, Liz had such great questions, and each of you presented so much rich information. I was taking notes, and I'll have to rewatch the video because there was so much to share there, so much to think about in terms of where we are in Oregon and where we could be and what changes might need to happen. So I just really appreciate you taking the time to share with us the journey. And it sounds like in each of your states, you've had a table set for a long time, but maybe the pandemic were both catalysts in that time period. And I think we've seen that in Oregon. I don't know that we saw that during the crisis of the pandemic, that employers definitely were showing up saying we need help. And I don't know if we really capitalized on that like we could have. And so I'm just feeling a little regret right now and also opportunity. And so much of what you shared about the messaging and who is the voice or who is telling the story, how powerful it can be for um, decision makers to hear from the business community. And so I think we have so much development to do in that way. And I appreciate that even in that changing in messaging to be more business aligned, you still were focusing on kindergarten readiness and some of the things. So you can do both. And then I think my final comment or and request is some of the toolkit for employers, some of the things, the resources that you mentioned, the playbook for private-public partnership. If those are readily available on your website, I will be looking for them. But if they're not, we would love to see those, because if we're going to make some things happen in Oregon, it's helpful to see what others have tried, what's worked, and learn from that. So just really a lot of appreciation for you taking the time to share your experience.
Thank you, Robin. I'd say very happy to share our resources. And also, I understand what you're saying about, like, we don't want to miss a moment. And that very executive who contacted me about the 1,000 employees who were, kind of off the grid. I remember him saying, he always called me Kath. And he'd say, Kath, you've got to deal with this now, because at some point this won't be an urgency. And some of this sort of expectation and sort of interest and motivation may dwindle. So don't lose a minute in, like, using this disruption to create opportunity. And so I look back at that day and I think, oh, we did get right on it, but even still, it feels like it takes a while to build the machine. And so I think, kind of, just deepening those relationships, making sure, I think some of the suggestions that have come up about making sure that there are business representatives on your council, maturing those kinds of partnerships is, it's just time to begin. And it's also a long game. It just doesn't happen overnight. It needs to be continuously nurtured.
Other questions or reflections for the panelists? I think you knocked our socks off. People are speechless.
Well, I'll jump in. One of the big issues that we've had is with adequate workforce for childcare, and and obviously it takes some time to develop that and to have some incentives and it's clearly tied into the salaries that that workforce receives. And just any thoughts on how each of you advance that in your states?
Do you want me to just go ahead and jump in first? Yeah, no, that is such an important insight, Peg. And one of the things that we've kind of seen where New Mexico is doing this great work around, trying to meet demand, but they are kind of struggling now because they don't have the supply of enough early childhood educators and childcare staff to kind of fill that workforce. And so we're very intentional about like our efforts need to focus on increasing supply. And so on the advocacy side, we have gotten through the budget is now a line item for recruitment and retention dollars that do flow directly to early childhood educators. I will say at the very first time last year, it was like $450 a year. You know, it's not game changing, but it gives you a pot upon which you can build. And it does definitely speak to that appreciation, and believe me, if you're making, $13 an hour, $450, I mean, that could really, help you with a car payment, your groceries, etc. But we also really look to, we have a very robust professional development organization system around the Commonwealth, but we also see great examples of local innovation where childcare providers are partnering with our local career links and workforce development organizations and helping to identify folks that are coming into the workforce for the first time or re-entering the workforce and helping to identify like, oh, this could be a great, entry level worker and helping them understand the career trajectory that, yeah, you're starting off kind of, this bottom tier, but Pennsylvania has a lot of resources to help pay for credentialing and higher education and knowing that, oh my gosh, like our deputy secretary of Octal started off, working in a childcare center. So there is that trajectory. But yes, I think that in anything, thinking about even, capitalize on a tax credit in which, an employer is contracting slots. Well, what's the price tag on those slots? Is it at market rate or is it at true cost of care? Because the true cost of care then provides that compensation stability more so than what we're currently seeing. So just really good insight, something we definitely have to consciously always be on top of.
Yeah. I would echo that as well. And one of the things that the Business Roundtable helped us get passed just in this General Assembly session, we're still waiting for the budget to conclude, but a bill was passed to create an early childhood access calculator. It's a funding formula, but our General Assembly doesn't like that term, so we call it an access calculator. And it helps us identify what the demand for early childhood services, quality early childhood services will be in the out years so that our appropriators can understand very precisely what they need to appropriate to cover these costs. And the cost model that we put together includes not only some cushion for additional families who would like to have access to, who are maybe on the wait list right now, need more services. What can we expect, the growth to be year over year? It also includes an upcharge for competitive compensation at 100% of the cost of quality methodology that Virginia now uses rather than market rate survey for setting those subsidy rates. It generates a big number, but we're unabashed about how if we want these services to be available for young children, if we want families to be able to be in the workforce, all of these things, the state economy, it all kind of like leans on the capacity of children to be in these services led by a talented teacher. And so, that's in a way, the way we're really working to socialize that these are investments that have to be made to gain the value that we'll get from a strong early childhood system.
Additional questions or reflections for the panelists? give folks a second in case there's somebody who's struggling with the mute button.
I think you all mentioned this, but just to punctuate it a little bit, can you tell us how long your states worked on this from, inception to where you see some victory or some real systems change? Because I think sometimes we want to see it really fast, and we know it takes a long time. And I just want to make that point again.
In Virginia, marathon of 20 plus years, and then a sprint since the pandemic. That was really a disruption that motivated a great deal of activity and progress and opportunity. And that seems so strange to say in a time of such loss and grief, but it really did allow for a real burst of progress for us.
Yeah, we thought there was a moment, right? And there was the silver lining of people paying attention to the issue. So that's really great to hear that you all were prepared enough to be able to leverage that momentum. I don't know that we were quite there yet in Oregon, but I think we're trying to get there, waiting to see when the next opportunity to leverage something happens here for us.
Pulling for you.
Yeah, yeah. And it is. I mean, I just think, you keep your eye on the prize, one foot in front of the other. But yeah, there are times where it is a marathon and then, I can agree, Kathy. I think that, that switch on the pandemic did motivate us to start running in kind of a different direction that we had been running before. We still absolutely, believe in the value of increased public sector investments, but we also are just so committed to bringing in those cross-sector partnerships intentionally to be able to, reach our big number, which is big in Pennsylvania, So, yeah.
1.6 billion a year in Virginia is our number.
Well, for us, at back of the napkin math, if we were going to go for like universal childcare, it's anywhere from 10 to 13 billion. So that's it. Yeah. It's a little daunting, but when you start getting creative, we're optimistic. Let's just say that.
I have maybe one last question. The council, we've been thinking about how do we as a council engage business. And so I'm wondering if you have any recommendations for us as a council about how we might engage or begin these conversations with businesses to start speaking about the need for childcare as an economic support and sort of driver in our state. Do you have any advice or recommendations for us?
Well, I'm sure Kathy will agree that we do an awful lot of public speaking, right? We're speaking in front of economic development associations. We're speaking in front of local chambers. We're speaking, in front of community development orgs. So I think, kind of getting in front of business leaders and folks that really get the economic or teaching them, the economic impact of insufficient childcare, and then start building the relationships. And I know one of the ways that it works really well with the Pennsylvania Early Learning Investment Commission is that those business leaders identify other business leaders who identify other business leaders. So it's also this word of mouth as well.
And just an additional thought, one thing that's been really effective through the Business Roundtable is we've gone to every region of the state and brought, invited people to come talk about their own perspectives and issues and concerns. So not only did that happen through the blueprint process, but very specific to childcare. We went in every region and invited businesses who showed up. Really, all the different stakeholders really showed up because we weren't talking to them, we were listening to them and hearing about their, kind of peer exchange about, I'm having these problems with my workforce getting, like finding access to childcare. What are you finding? What are you doing in your locality? Those sorts of conversations. And that led to them wanting to be part of the Business Roundtable and actively, working together to identify solutions. So I would just say, don't ever underestimate the power of listening and allowing for them to share their own experiences and concerns.
This has been so wonderful and insightful. I have so many ideas for what we might do differently in Oregon. So thank you both for sharing part of the morning with us and the incredible work that you're both doing in your states.
Well, it was an honor to do so. Thank you so much for the time, and shout out to Carrie McCann, an old buddy. Good to see you. Veteran buddy, not old.
Very good to see you. I have started counting the decades, Kathy.
Good luck to you all. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you all. Okay. Wonderful. I'm inspired, actually. We thought we would zoom back down into Oregon for the next session and turn it over actually to some of our co-council members, our foundations, just to talk about, this is sort of part of our effort, I think, to keep the council grounded in what the entire ecosystem landscape looks like for early childhood work and investment that's happening. And so I asked Robin, Ruby, and Marie to share sort of what their foundations are, where they're focusing their time and attention in the early childhood space, anything that's sort of coming on the horizon that they would like to share. So I will turn it over to the three of you to decide who goes first.
Do you think I did the nose thing? That means I don't go first, I think. I'm in the agenda, I'm listed first. I'm happy to go first, but I have to say, following what I just heard, that was a really interesting conversation. I learned a lot. I'm inspired as well, Liz, and even hesitating to talk about our priorities just because we don't usually do that at this table, but then also being inspired by what states can do with public-private partnership. I want to rewrite some of the things that I wanted to share this morning, but I won't. I'll share the things that I plan to share, but what I would say is, the three of us are representing just a handful of foundations in Oregon. So there's definitely more to the ecosystem and the context in private foundations. I would also share that I'm not going to get into details about the things that we fund. I think some of that is available, and I'm happy to talk to people individually to get into some of the specifics. But I will focus it mostly on our early childhood education, since that was the task this morning. So I'll try to stay on task for that. But I'm going to zoom up a little bit and just talk about the context of how we see philanthropy's role. And this may be different for each one of us. So one of us is not like the other. Anyway, I'll just to talk a little bit about how we see philanthropy as a partner and a catalyst, not replacing public systems. We are so minimal in the scheme of funding compared to many of the state, federal, and local dollars that philanthropy, even though it seems sometimes that they have a significant funding role, but they really are not as big as others. And so we really rely on partnering and being a catalyst for things versus like funding general things that are needed. And so systems work and policy works and tends to be a better space for us. But we see our role in strengthening early care and education by supporting stable families. So this connection between stable families and the economics of early childhood, as well as the healthy development and well-being of children, is at the center of how we view that, especially in rural communities, because the Ford Family Foundation focuses on rural communities where resources are often not there, are thin, but leadership and innovation and community building is strong. And we also see that philanthropy can move earlier sometimes, take risks. We can help align partners locally and at the state level. So that maybe public investments can go farther and last longer. So we look for places like that where we can be, influential or have an impact. One of the areas that we're really proud of and lean into even more is what we call rural champion space. So think of it as the community, the families, the people, the childcare providers, they are the ones who know what is needed. And so trying to get louder about how the Ford Family Foundation elevates those voices is core strategy for us in investing in these rural champions, supporting local leaders and those I mentioned to elevate their voice. And just thinking on the heels of that conversation, how do we get messaging better to business owners to help them speak on the topic? So I'm inspired by that part of the conversation. So we like to center local voice and especially parent leadership and advisory. We believe systems are stronger when families aren't just beneficiaries, but co-designers. And this shows up through our parent councils, advisory groups, community-led coalitions, and local systems work. And speaking of coalitions, this is one of our main strategies in early childhood work. And so systems work that's leveraging other funds. We invest in coalitions because systems change doesn't happen program by program, but it happens when partners align. And so we've seen some amazing things happen in community around coalition work. Philanthropy can help by convening partners, sometimes providing flexible funding, coordination funding to help test approaches. Sometimes you've seen some of the work we've done around that. Innovation is a great place for philanthropy. A time right now when things are financially budgeting is tight, innovation feels like deaf. It sounds like we're not listening. And so it is an interesting time for us to think about what that looks like during constricting budget times. We also focus on strengthening backbone capacity of agencies so that coalitions and other work is not run on volunteer energy alone. You've probably heard in rural that many hats is a term is used and everyone does everything. And sometimes we can strengthen their capacity by providing funding. Our goal is always to leverage public funds, not compete with them, support programs while advancing public or policy and system change. And so those are some of the things that we think about while we also continue to support workforce pipelines, programs, and other parts of the program and system on both end of workforce, parent side to improve long-term funding and outcomes for early child system and families' needs. I'm also wanted to talk about public-private partnership, but after that conversation, it feels a little bit redundant, but just to say that we believe it's essential in rural places, and we're super grateful for our partnership with DELC, OHA, ODHS, and other state agencies, as well as all the private foundations, including Marie and Ruby here, as well as others, where we have been able to fund things together, to learn together, to have a bigger impact, and sometimes stand up models that can then be sustained longer by state or federal dollars. And that increases our impact statewide. And so I'm really grateful for those partnerships and relationships. They allow philanthropy to support infrastructure, data, staffing, coordination, and public funding that often can't afford or can't fund those things. So it's a great place for philanthropy to partner up and do that. And just a couple more things I would say is we have at the Ford Family Foundation been staffing up in the areas of communication and policy. We have a new director of communication. We have a director of policy starting next week. And those two things are really going to take us to the next level in terms of our ability to amplify and elevate the issues that rural communities are facing. And of course, childcare and early childhood education is one of those things. But lifting up rural stories and local solutions, we want to use our voice and advocacy to help coalitions and parents communicate what's working and what's not working, sharing narratives, connecting stable families and early childhood education with long-term outcomes is our goal. And we understand that clear, consistent communication, which was just really articulated well, helps build public will and inform public decisions. So we're going to get better at doing that. So as we look ahead, we felt incredible loss in the pandemic around Oregon foundations working together. We've heard from our community partners that philanthropy needs to do a better job to coordinate, especially around early childhood. And we have felt that loss, and we've heard about it from all of you and others. Ruby and I are working, and she can share more about OCF's role, but working diligently on a steering committee to rejuvenate the Oregon Early Childhood Funders Collaborative. 2027, believe it or not, marks 20-year anniversary from the beginning of that table being set. It's an important table for us to build private partnerships, and then, of course, plug into public and private partnerships. So it's a great place for us to be investing in, and for us as partners at that table. Just in closing, I would say ultimately our work is about stable families, strong early learning systems, and durable partnerships that are grounded in local leadership and aligned with public priorities. So I'm grateful to be able to share a little bit this morning about the Ford Family Foundation, and maybe there'll be questions, but I'll turn it over to whoever's next.
Well, thank you, Robin, for kicking us off, and I will just follow the order that Gabby put us in. So, yeah, a lot of what I'll say mirrors what Robin says. Our foundations have been working very closely for decades at this point. Oregon Community Foundation has been funding in the early childhood space for over 20 years because, like all of you, we understand the importance of supporting children in their youngest years, but not only for a child's or a family's individual success, but as a mechanism towards thriving communities, right? So at OCF, we do this work statewide, and we tend to work at the systems and initiative level. And I would say, I think similar to Robin, the role of philanthropy is to both explore innovations that can move the field forward, while also supporting our existing systems, right? So we try to ensure we're doing some of both at Oregon Community Foundation in the program that I in the program that I oversee, that is early childhood. That program is nested in our education team and our community engagement and equity department. And so we have multiple impact areas, and this is one of those. I think we try to look at both things, right? What is the innovation? How do we move things forward? But we also know that particularly childcare has a lot of churn, right? And it feels like we're continuously filling a bucket that has a hole at the bottom, but that needs to happen, right? We know we still need an early childhood workforce. So while the system is being improved, we're still kind of holding together what we currently have. And I think there's a role for philanthropy to hold both. Our specific approach has been to support the adults in the lives of young children so that they receive high quality, culturally affirming services that help close opportunity gaps across the state, because again, OCF is a statewide foundation doing work across the state. And our focus has traditionally been support for the early childhood workforce, largely focused on the childcare workforce specifically. We have supported other things like home visiting and doula work in small chunks. It's not our core. Our core has traditionally been around childcare. We support scholarships for community-based training, as well as community college scholarships, and a variety of professional development opportunities and workforce initiatives, one of them being our shared services work. So currently we have a strong focus on childcare business coaching and technical assistance, largely around home-based childcare providers to drive increased access to childcare and increase program sustainability, because we want stability for our kids, we want stability for families, we want stability for our local economies, and we also want stability for this very important workforce that is often underpaid. So this work is also in collaboration with foundation partners, as well as a partnership with DELC. So the public-private partnership here that Robin mentioned shows up. And then as a response to community articulated needs that have emerged since the COVID pandemic, and in alignment with DELC's work around Every Child Belongs, we're developing work focused on sort of social emotional development and belonging. And so while this work is emerging, probably has a little runway of me working on this and developing something and talking to partners, we're examining workforce development innovations that align across systems. So for example, a big example, one that I can see clearly is early intervention, early childhood special ed. How does that tie into infant and early childhood mental health? What are the connections? How are we creating pathways? How do we reduce duplication across these systems? So things like that at the large systems level. Also thinking about what does it look like to support marginalized communities in this space of social emotional development and belonging. So have a couple strands of work that we're thinking through right now, but it's really kind of focused on this social emotional development piece that has really, I think the pandemic really had an impact on how kids are sort of developing, and we've talked at length, I think, here. So this is our sort of a response to that, and how can we support development since then. And of course, to Robin's point, systems change doesn't happen on its own, and it doesn't happen quickly. So we support a limited number of policy and advocacy organizations that do work in coalitions with communities, mainly around childcare. And we do kind of sprinkle in support for other sort of emerging opportunities in the space. So for example, we know there's lots of doula work happening, and that is a system innovation that we are happy to try to support in some small ways, even though it's not a core function of our early childhood program. But we do look at a variety of things that are sort of emerging in the ecosystem, although we target childcare more specifically. So I will say that partnerships have been and continue to be important for OCF, and the work we'll do with the Early Childhood Funders Learning Circle here can hopefully be a place where we begin to map philanthropic investments in the early childhood space to better coordinate for the good of our youngest Oregonians. I think we have heard a desire for that sort of mapping, and we can think about that, and we can invite others to sort of help us align a little bit better, right? If we can have some more alignment, we can more clearly see where the gaps are, and have some joint strategy around how we help fill those gaps. So it's been wonderful to have very close partnerships with other early childhood funders like Robin and Marie. So really appreciate that, and we look forward to doing more of that. OCF has kind of staffed this Early Childhood Funders Learning Circle since its inception, but it is really a broad coalition of funders, and we want to invite a lot more people back into the table. There are many, many competing priorities, but we know this one is critical. So we're going to do our best to sort of reinvigorate this group and try to pull people together a little bit more in 2027. So I will stop there and pass it on to Marie.
Thanks, Ruby. I think both of Ruby and Robin covered the majority of what the key points are here. I think all I would add to the conversation is, so the Bannon Dunes Charitable Foundation really jumped into this work before the pandemic, primarily with a business lens on. And that happened because there was a childcare business in our area that the owner decided to retire, and it created quite a childcare void, which happens in rural towns. And so jumping in, sort of asking those business questions around what is the business sustainability? How do we create a business that with childcare slots that, so these types of questions we're still asking. And I would say, just to build off what Robin said, we always look for opportunities to leverage other dollars. We know that philanthropy is just a small slice of the pie where the larger dollars really lie with the state and fed. So projects that we can co-fund and help others access funds that are available, we do. We're also a little bit different, and we focus our funding in Cruz and Curry counties, whereas OCF and Ford are statewide funders. We do see a real linkage between the solutions that need to work locally and the things that are happening at the state. So where we see opportunity to get engaged or involved in those conversations, hence sitting on this early learning council in hopes that we can make substantive movement towards bettering systems for our local constituents. And then, another, I think, role that we look to play is to help folks learn what's working and what doesn't work. And we've done that through funding projects like the Abandoned Community Child Care Center, and also helping leveraging funds and building off of what's happening at the Business Accelerator on the South Coast. So, and then lastly, I would just say part of, I think, what our thrust too is around really galvanizing and helping to support those local leaders who are doing the work and coming up with the innovations and being the leaders and the champions. And so we are engaged in capacity funding to sort of help elevate those voices and make those systems work as well as they can. So that's about it.
Wonderful. Council. Well, most of the council just presented. Does anybody who is not part of one of the foundations have questions or reflections? I will just say I'm excited about the collaborative that you all are working on, and eager as that stood back up in 2027 to hear more about how that looks and how the council can support that work, and just really excited that you guys have opted to add one more thing to your plate and try to reconstitute it. There questions or feedback? It doesn't look like it. All right. Well, thank you all for sharing, and you all are doing such incredible work across the state in your communities. I personally see it in my community and some of the investments that you all have made. So thank you for that. And we are actually running a little bit ahead of schedule. And so what I am thinking is we can take about a 7-minute break, 5 to 7 minutes, and then come back at 10:45, and we will start off with the directors and agencies to share some updates. So let's take a quick break, and we'll see you in, let's say, about 8 minutes. Council, if you can start making your way back and turning on your cameras if you're with us. Like we've got most folks back. All right. Okay, it's 10:45, so let's go ahead and resume the Early Learning Council meeting, and we'll move into the agency director updates. And Alyssa, I will turn it over to you for an update from DELC.
Thanks, Liz. Great to see everyone. So I do have a couple quick updates from the Department of Early Learning and Care. We are all as agencies sort of getting ready to prepare our 27-29 agency request budgets, and are in the early stages of some kind of key deadlines across the enterprise. And so we were able to share some of our preliminary thinking at a community webinar last week, but wanted to make sure the council had insight on sort of the frame and the bodies of work that we're exploring. On the policy front, through legislative concepts, we really have four main ideas that we're working through. The first is a small technical adjustment. We noticed that in the early literacy package that had been created, including the Birth Through 5 Literacy Plan, the allowable use of funding for tribal language was limited to tribal language revitalization, and was not inclusive of preservation. You all have adopted rules that do include preservation, but through consultation with tribes, really want to have that durability of a statutory allowability as we think about, potential changes in the future. And so we have been working with our partners at the Oregon Department of Education to correct this and make the preservation addition in both the Birth Through 5 literacy portion and the broader early literacy success initiative work. The second is technical but big. We states have been informed of new interpretations of the FBI's requirements to access their information for background checks. And rules are no longer sort of a sufficient place for subject individuals, those who are subject to the background check, to live. So we have been working very hard to lift up everything that's in rule, and we have a legislative concept to move that into statute. So this is largely going to be kind of a copy paste of what's in rule, with some places where we've had to be a little bit more defined, where we've been told that we're too broad. So that is the second body of work we're looking at. The third has to do with you all as the council. Some of you have been around a bit, but the council is fun because this body was started in two ways. Back in 2011, we, of course, had Senate Bill 909 and the creation of the Early Learning Council as an advisory body. And then in 2012, there was House Bill 4165, which created the council within the governor's office. And that was meant to be sort of the staffing component as the Commission for Children and Families was sunsetting. And so when we were creating DELC, we looked at all of the statutes that had referenced the early learning division, but there's a whole chunk of statutes that Gabby's helped us identify that were sort of in that limbo space of they were actually referencing the council as the office, but didn't get changed into DELC. And so it's another cleanup bill that is trying to clarify and separate DELC's responsibilities from the office council responsibilities and you all as our advisory board council. So that's the third body of work. And then the last is sort of new. But one of the things that we've really been looking at as we have a biennium under our belt as an agency is what are the controls that we need to have in place to be really good stewards of public funds and make sure that we're working on program and fiscal integrity and have the ability to deploy resources well and get them to the families, providers, and communities that need them. And so we have a legislative concept that works to establish some needed authorities that we've identified to be able to do that work. And so we want to make sure that we have the right authorities that any other agency administering state and federal funding would have. So being able to investigate, take administrative action if funds are misused, and making sure that that's articulated well. So this would allow us to have a standardized process to follow and implement a progressive enforcement approach, corrective action plans, things like that. So those are sort of the 4 legislative paths that we are pursuing. In terms of budget requests, we know that this is a constrained budget environment with limited revenue to be able to even fund current service level as we see the impacts of growing inflation. And so we are working to have revenue neutral requests. So this means working within our own budget to pay for these new initiatives. We're really focusing on capacity, and so this is looking at childcare licensing division. So an exciting trend we're seeing is that childcare capacity is growing across the state, and it's not just growing in terms of the number of facilities, but the size of facilities. So this means that our licensing visits are taking more time because licensors have to spend more time going through those monitoring visits, and we're trying to increase our monitoring and oversight of our other programs like Preschool Promise. So we would hope to expand our childcare licensing division staffing by leveraging some federal funds. We also, as we hope to have additional kind of program integrity statutory authority, we want to make sure we have the staff to actually use that authority and do that work. And so creating some type of kind of grant and aid compliance unit. And then our last policy option package is thinking about our new Oregon Early Learning Management System that launches this summer. That system will obviously replace our licensing and provider payment functions. And our hope is that we can build off this system to replace other functions in the future. And we're just sort of learning as we get closer to launch, as we talk to our partners at other agencies about the importance of having dedicated capacity to really oversee that system. So that's the third bucket of potential requests that we are pursuing right now. Again, recognizing that we need to really be targeted and thoughtful, knowing that we're looking at some constrained budget environments to think about how we move this work forward. So happy to answer any questions about that.
Any questions for Alyssa?
I don't have any questions, but Alyssa also just wanted to add counsel because I know Alyssa mentioned the early learning management system. We do have some time at next month's council meeting for you all to get an update on that rollout. So that is coming. Just wanted to make that plug here so that folks were aware of that.
Thanks, Gabby.
Alyssa, can you, for those who are new to the council, just do maybe a high level overview of like, so you guys are working on POPs, then this goes to the governor's office. Like, what are the steps before there's actually a GRB and sort of how does that look?
Absolutely. Happy to do that. So we all, as state agencies, received guidance for our agency request budget in March, middle of March. And so this is the first sort of bite at the apple. And ARBs can look different biennium to biennium. Last biennium, agencies were told to hold any new funding requests to 1% of our general fund budget. So for DELC, that was limiting to $6 million in new funding requests. And then this biennium, we're working in sort of a revenue neutral approach. So both having to deal with more constrained revenue environments, but different approaches to responding to them. And so this is meant to be our sort of best take on what's needed within the confines of what the budget can really support. And this is really an indicator to the legislature and the governor about what agencies say they need. We are able to have one revenue forecast that will kind of help inform this. The governor will get the September and November revenue forecasts. And so what we saw last time is the revenue forecast had improved. And so the governor's recommended budget included more asks than what agencies had put forward. And so a lot of this is making sure the governor is aware of other investment concepts or opportunities that communities and other partners want to surface in case there are additional revenues available for her to purchase that. The agency request budget is our list of things within the confines we're given. The governor's recommended budget has to be a balanced budget. So she can only ask for what she wants to ask for within what the revenue supports. And then the legislature, so that we will have our agency request budget out by September 1. The governor will have her recommended budget out by December 1. And then the legislature will begin convening in January and be able to look at the ARB and GRB as sort of starting points for the legislatively adopted budget, which has a couple of more revenue forecasts and will also need to end up as a balanced budget by the end of June.
Other questions for Alyssa?
I was trying to pull it up while you were talking, Alyssa, sorry, but just want to flag the just budget timeline that Alyssa was referencing. Give me 1 second, and then just want to show that to folks, and then yeah, happy to pass it to Robin.
Perfect. Robin, did you have a question?
Yeah, I think so. Just about the Early Learning Council piece, that I was remembering the conversation we had at the retreat last fall, where we were revisiting some of that language. So I know this is a little bit different about positioning where the council is as an advisory to DELC, and it may not be addressing some of those things, but would it be at that juncture that we would update some of the language that I remember us identifying that not all the agencies were listed that we thought we should have listed, and just is it an opportunity to massage some of that language?
Absolutely. Gabby, do you want to share a little bit about how Gabby's been the lead for us on this, so.
Yeah, Robin, great question. And yes, part of the cleanup bill for the ELC legislative concept does include that updating, specifically that Raise Up Oregon language, because I think as folks remember, right, some of that language that's currently in statute references the early learning system. So we actually aligned it to the early childhood system and what's currently in Raise Up Oregon. And we did do some cleanup. I know generally, right, I think the statute just mentions relevant state agencies, which I think we wanted to keep it like that without actually naming it, just because it creates it allows for flexibility, right? Just in case we need to, I guess, add state agencies. So do want to preface that we are updating that language as well within this cleanup.
That's great. Thank you. And I always appreciate a reminder of the timing and how you all are tracking on that. It's it's helpful to know when you have to have the certain recommendations in by when, and that's great. Thank you.
It feels like a hamster wheel a bit. Like, didn't we just finish session and we're already planning? But it makes sense. And council, I think I've just made a note for Gabby that we'll invite the other agency directors to come share their pops and things in future meetings. But we've got ODE with us and housing with us as well. Those are going to be program updates. So just wanted to sort of set the expectation that we will provide some time in an upcoming meeting to have the other agencies come and share sort of their pops and how they're thinking about their budgets for early childhood. So with that, I think we have Kara joining us from ODE. Welcome, Kara. Do you want to give us an update?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chair Farrar Campbell and members of the council. Thank you again for inviting me here today. My name is Kara Williams, and I am the Director of Inclusive Services in the Office of Enhancing Student Opportunities at the Department of Education. I'll start briefly with an update on early literacy, which continues to be a major focus across our early learning and K-12 systems. ODE is working closely with the Department of Early Learning and Care on the Oregon Literacy Advisory Roundtable to develop the state's first state literacy plan. The plan's bringing together existing initiatives and policies across our agencies with a goal of improving alignment and coherence from birth through grade 12. Alongside this work, ODE continues to support our instructional practice with professional learning. The literacy team has been engaging educators statewide through conferences, early learning sessions, and communities of practice, including some joint presentations with the Department of Early Learning and Care on some promising literacy practices from birth through age 5. ODE is also partnering with the Teaching Standards and Practices Commission and the Education Advancement Council to provide a free science of reading training, helping to ensure that every Oregon teacher has access to high quality and evidence-based early literacy instruction. We're also contributing implementation of the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant. Later this year, we're going to be collecting some annual reports from our grantees, including data on the growth in oral language skills for children enrolled in pre-K. We anticipate that we will be able to share this data publicly in the fall of 2026 to support transparency in statewide learning. Now shifting a bit and turning to a subject close to my heart also, early intervention and early childhood special education. We are modernizing our general supervision system to strengthen the accountability and to better support our local programs. This updated approach combines some predictable cyclical monitoring and we'll be looking at key requirements and reviewing those every 3 years with some focused and on-site monitoring when deeper review is needed. A central component of this work is our new Ed Plan, new monitoring system, which integrates data from our statewide individual family service plan system that we use now called ECWeb. We'll be importing information from ECWeb so that we can review all child data, not just samples of data. This will improve our data quality and reporting. It will help us identify some trends earlier, and it will help us to better connect our oversight to improvement planning focused on outcomes for children and families. So I'll be excited to be able to bring even to the Early Learning Council some richer data and some deeper data analysis in the future. We've also prioritized infant and early childhood mental health supports within our early intervention. Through our partnership with the Oregon Infant Mental Health Association, early intervention providers have access to training and some reflective supervision towards their IECMH endorsement. This year, we launched a Reflective Supervisor Fellowship to grow supervisory capacity directly within the early intervention workforce, and we're hoping to support some long-term sustainability of the effort. And lastly, I just want to highlight some progress in early childhood inclusion. Last week, the Department of Education and the Department of Early Learning and Care released the 2026 Oregon Early Childhood Inclusion Impact Report, which demonstrates a 76% increase in access to inclusive early learning environments since 2020 and 2021. More than 2,100 additional children with disabilities are now being served alongside their same age peers in community settings in their neighborhoods, with statewide access raising to nearly 57%. This year also marked the release of our partner FACT, Oregon's new Inclusive Education Toolkit, which provides families accessible guidance on early intervention, early childhood special education, and inclusive learning options. So together, we are really hoping that these efforts reflect Oregon's continued commitment to equity, belonging, and strong partnerships across our early learning systems. And just want to thank you all again for inviting me here to share these updates.
Any questions for Kara?
I don't have a question. I just want to say thanks and appreciate sort of the cross-reaching of ECSC and infant and early childhood mental health, something that I've been hoping to see for a long time. So really excited to see that work moving forward and looking forward to ways to continue supporting that work as well.
Great, thank you.
Other questions or reflections? Thanks for coming, Kara. It's always great to see you.
Thank you very much.
We'll move over now to Chelsea with Housing and Community Services.
Thank you, Chair Farrar Campbell. Good to see you, council members. Great to see you. My name is Chelsea Bunch. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm the Director of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion with Oregon Housing and Community Services, and also have been a long time Raise Up Oregon member. So really good to see you all today. I'm going to share some updates. I'm going to focus both on Momnibus as well as I have a few just general co-location updates. So I'll start with Momnibus. So you all might know Momnibus bill was Senate Bill 690 out of the 2025 legislative regular session. Just as a quick reminder, it was really relating to perinatal public health and declaring an emergency, particularly delaying evictions for babies and their families who needed help with rental assistance. Also connected to that was there were some requirements for OHCS, which is cool, and I think really in line with our joint work together. So that Momnibus bill, Senate Bill 690, required that Oregon Housing and Community Services prioritize whenever possible families with children under 12 months of age. It also required that the department, that our agency submits a report to the interim committee of the Legislative Assembly on the rate of unsheltered homelessness of children. That report is not going to be due until September 15th. However, we do know that the data sets that will be used in that report will include both the point in time count data as well as likely data from the Oregon Child Integrated Data Set. So I think those will just be some important things to note. So for us kind of internally to determine which programs may best support positive outcomes for households with young children, our housing stabilization team is examining our existing housing stabilization programs that include shelter, rehousing, eviction prevention as well. And we think that the prioritization will occur in the 27-29 budget, as we're just trying to understand what the current context is right now. And so in addition to the work on that specific Momnibus bill, we're also implementing a youth and families policy and program project within the agency. Really, the purpose of this project is for us to examine the effectiveness of programs within our division, and that's within the Housing Stabilization Division, at serving unaccompanied youth and households with children. So this will primarily include an outcomes and funding analysis of our specific housing stabilization programs. However, a component of this project, we also are incorporating kind of a landscape analysis to better understand the broader context within which our programs are operating. So this will include a high-level overview of youth and family-focused programs available within other divisions at OHCS, as well as within other state agencies, particularly for households who are experiencing or at risk of homelessness. Our team is also conducting a literature review in order to incorporate some best practices on effective program delivery for youth and households with children, which is really great. As they started to dig into that, our team is noting that once the initial findings have been identified, phase 2 of that project will include engagement with households with lived experience. So we're going to hear from the folks with the intent of looking really critically at the conclusions made during phase 1 of that project. And the final outcome will be a report that will represent our findings from both phases of that project. While direct recommendations may not be incorporated into the report, the intent is to provide a resource to support data-informed decision-making for Housing Stabilization Division to effectively serve youth and households with children, including decision-making around prioritization for infants as directed by Senate Bill 690 in the Momnibus. I have a link to a presentation that I would love to drop in the chat, but Gabby, I'll have to get that to you probably after the meeting because I don't have access to it. So I'll request access and share that. And this will be the the PowerPoint that I'll share will be what we shared with our Housing Stability Council in March related to the Youth and Families Policy and Program Project. So more to come, follow up on that. And then just a couple of quick updates on co-location. It's still moving and grooving. It's still a very, very important program and resource for us. The Low Income Investment Fund, or LIFT, is providing some direct technical assistance to some of the applicants via their partnership with Craft 3. And they are kind of collectively working on actively reinvigorating that pipeline. A couple of notes from some specific projects. Housing Work changed their early childhood ed provider from Antler Head Start to Deschutes Children's Foundation. Habitat for Humanity in Newburgh, which is a home ownership project, was changed from $700,000 to $850,000 from Craft 3 to address some pre-development needs. We've got a partner, our Coastal Village, which received an award of $1.4 million. And that changed and reduced down to $750,000 just in response to some of the changed plans. So nothing out of pocket, but sometimes in these development projects, things shift over time. And so we make adjustments as needed. On the development side of that also includes that Meadowlark has moved from financial eligibility to commitment, which is really great because that is the end of the ORCA process. And just for you all to know, the Oregon Consolidated Application Process, which is what ORCA stands for, it is our agency's development pipeline process. So anyone that's coming in to build sticks and bricks housing has to funnel through this Oregon Consolidated Application where we can do matching of resources. We can connect folks to internal in-house technical advisors along the way. And those folks follow that project all the way through to commitment. And once you get to commitment, now you're starting to move into groundbreaking. So it's excited to see that Meadowlark has made that move from eligibility to commitment through the process. So I know that was a lot. I appreciate you and your grace as I read through some critical talking points, and happy to answer questions as I can. And whatever I don't know, I'm happy to bring back to our team to get follow-up. It's good to see you all. Thanks.
So good to see you too, and exciting that people are getting ready to break ground. That's always exciting. Robin, question.
Thank you for that update. So there is the report that you described in the beginning is coming out this next September.
Yes, September 15th.
That's great. That is great to hear. And I think, I don't know if my question's gonna be the right space, so you can say pass. Some of this work that we've supported in youth, unhoused youth, in our regions, I'm still trying to understand. I know that funding has shifted, and maybe what I'm hearing is it doesn't pencil out to do unhoused youth shelters. And I just wonder, like, is there anything changing in the environment that makes that more so? And maybe it's a scale, like the smaller the community, the harder it is. And so do you have any insight into that?
Well, I don't know that I have particular insight. So maybe this is a pass and, well, I shouldn't say pass. I'll say a follow-up and, because I think that our housing stabilization team, particularly thinking of one of our managers in particular, who probably would have some much better insight. And so happy to follow up. I'll just say, in terms of development and operations, things always are a little bit more difficult in rural and very rural communities, just because of, what they call it, economies of scale, right? The scale is just a little bit different. Being able to attach resources is a little bit different, but it's also, I'm happy to take that question as a follow-up to our housing stabilization team and just see if they have any additional insights into that, for sure.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Other questions for Chelsea? Doesn't look like it. Chelsea, thank you so much for spending part of the morning with us. It's always so nice to see you. All right. Okay, we are going to move into a program update on Baby Promise, which I think is fast becoming one of my favorite programs. And Mady is here to share what's been going on and how things are going with Baby Promise. Mady, are you there?
Yes, I am. I am going to work on sharing my screen. And I'm hoping, let me make sure I've got my.
Oh, Mady, you're on mute, but right now we're seeing your notes. I think you wanna.
Okay, so I have to somehow move you to the other screen. Which would be this one, I think. Is that the right one?
Yeah, perfect.
Good. And hopefully my audio will also do what it's supposed to do. I'm trying to keep you where you're supposed to be. All right. Thank you so much. Hello, Chair Farrar Campbell and members of the Early Learning Council. It is so great to see you today. My name is Mady Rosengarten. My pronouns are she, her, and I manage the Baby Promise program here at the Department of Early Learning and Care. And Baby Promise is growing. My purpose today is to share with you more about the program, learning since I last met with you, and the current story of Baby Promise is told by providers and families. And I want to offer you some evidence that Baby Promise, the model, is an effective investment for Oregon. And a footnote to you, in your packet, you have copies of these slides, you have a transcript of the audio clips that I will be playing for you, and you have some quotes from families that you can read at your convenience. So what is Baby Promise? A little bit of an overview here. Baby Promise is a publicly funded, high-quality early care and education program for infants and toddlers aged 6 weeks to 3 years in high-need communities across Oregon. The mission of this program is to expand access to stable, quality infant and toddler care. And unlike some other subsidies, Baby Promise uses a contracted slot model to directly invest in and stabilize the supply of high-quality childcare providers. This shifts the focus from subsidizing demand to building and guaranteeing quality supply. We fund supply first because we have significant demand, and we have a need for slot stability and quality. Supply can be volatile, and it's exacerbated in infant toddler programs because, as you know, babies just get born at all different times, rather than when we have a slot ready for them. Baby Promise's clients are first, the families who are eligible for employment-related daycare or ERDC. Second, the grantees are our clients. These are the teams at each child care resource and referral agency in each Baby Promise region. This collaborative model distributes leadership amongst partners. The CCR&Rs are at the heart of the program's success as they sit in the middle of the state's early learning system and support families, providers, and state goals all at once. The grantees subcontract with the local early learning providers who are eligible to be Baby Promise providers. For these providers, grantees are responsible for required training, coaching, professional developments, specific to infant toddler development care and education. Grantees help providers understand and comply with licensing rules specific to caring for our most vulnerable population. They provide training that promotes the annual growth and development of programs and early educators towards high quality practices at the most robust level. Finally, the grantee teams work with each other across the regions, which raises not only the boats of the providers, but also the boats of those who work with them, and in turn, we here at DELC, who are working to serve the continuum of individual families, agencies, and grantees in our diverse state. Baby Promise is a commitment to invest in the most critical period of human development, the first 3 years of life. A little bit of history. Baby Promise originated around 2018 with the Early Learning Division, and I am especially grateful to Dana Bleakney-Hoopsch, John Reeves, David Mandel, and Sue Miller for their significant contributions to this model. It began as a pilot program around 2020, survived the global pandemic. Eligible families can bypass the current ERDC waitlist, and rules for the program became effective, thanks to you, in April of 2024. We serve 3 regions in Oregon: Multnomah, Central Oregon, and the South Coast. These are the 3 service areas for Baby Promise grantees, who are the CCR&R agencies, again, that then subcontract with providers eligible to be Baby Promise providers. So who does the program serve? Well, we serve children across 5 counties, and we offer families a range of provider types. In this most recent year, this included 40 sites serving 273 children. Grantees know their communities and strive to contract with providers from across the delivery model. A benefit of mixed delivery and the community-based approach is that providers mirror the racially and ethnically diverse children and families they serve. In addition to serving families, the Baby Promise model serves providers. In this collaborative model, providers have had the opportunity to interact with providers from other regions. We're going to hear from a rural provider now, and Gabby, wave your hands if you can't hear.
Something that I appreciate about the program is how inclusive they are, how supportive. They've helped build my business to where it's very well rounded, and like I'm able to get paid more, and I'm able to have all the resources that I need to be successful. So I love that about Baby Promise.
Now let's hear from a certified center.
I would say like the depth and the breadth of knowledge. So whether it's a question about compliance or a question about something going on with ERCD payments, or it's something about different processes to support staff in learning, or more resources for families about nutritional meals, whatever it is, I know I can ask that question and someone will circle back with me. And I think that's really wonderful. They're really collaborative. I was thinking that Baby Promise was going to be more of a quantitative process with, me meeting requirements and contract obligations, and then getting financial reimbursements for meeting said requirements. But it's really more of a qualitative, collaborative relationship. And so that surprised me.
So what does the Baby Promise funding support? What you see here is the budget for DELC programs, and this graphic represents program budgets for this biennium. The Baby Promise slice is at the top in bright blue, and it's less than 1% of the total. For Baby Promise, the allocation for this biennium is almost $10 million. In terms of spending for this 25-27 biennium, the Baby Promise grantees are on track for spending all of their funds. The grantee budgets are in 2 buckets: operations for grantees and the supplemental dollars that the grantees pay to the Baby Promise providers as part of their subcontracts. A really important goal of the Baby Promise program from the beginning was to support business sustainability. And this has been done through contracted slots, which offer stability, some shared services that offer coaching and training and business supports, in addition to grantee technical assistance for the business side of the work. The model requires grantees to support Baby Promise providers with business practices like navigating contracts, insurance policies, finances, using childcare management software. Baby Promise providers are able to get connected to shared services alliances such as OCCA, the Oregon Child Care Alliance, who work collaboratively with them at the level of support they need as they grow. A recent Ford Family Foundation report noted that shared services alliances are particularly valuable for home-based childcare and small childcare centers, given how difficult it is for these businesses to reach financial sustainability when working in isolation. In addition, the funds support environments and instructional support and coaching, which I'll go into in the next few slides. But first, let's hear from a provider about business supports.
Hello, I'm Patty Mong, and I have a registered family in Coquille over here on the coast. And I have been with Baby Promise since the beginning as well, back in the pilot days, and have seen a lot of changes, and it's been quite a ride, and it's been so worth it. As I've already heard the other providers say, the most amazing thing is how much support we get and the resources that are available that I never dreamed, that were out there. And it's been an incredible blessing. And as Holly stated, I'm making more money and able to focus on a smaller group of children. And in our little community here, it's been an incredible blessing to have Baby Promise. I believe I'm the only one in Coquille. And so it's just, I can't say enough about what a great program it is.
Another one of the program's original goals was to invest in environments specific to the needs of infants and toddlers, and these early investments have made a significant difference across all three regions and deeply impacted the programs. Let's hear from a center first, and I think you'll hear some interesting changes in these clips about teachers' responses to children's development and clearer visions of quality for program directors.
The change in the classroom was phenomenal. We got a 2-story structure, and we call it the Quiet Castle, and it has all these archways. So then children can go underneath it and they can quietly play, but we can still see them, and they can see out of it, but they can feel hidden. And then sometimes a child might be feeling frustrated or having a hard time and wanting to play, but not necessarily wanting to play with someone else, and a space spot isn't working because they want more play, right? A bigger space. So then they can go in the top of the castle and they can build up there because they can see everyone all the way around the whole entire classroom. And so that really transformed our space, and we saw a lot less conflict with the kiddos because we had this wonderful space where they could go to play with their friends, but they could also go to have quiet time if they wanted to be by themselves.
Funds are also dedicated to instructional coaching and programmatic technical assistance. You can see on this graph that the number of meetings between a provider or teacher and a coach and the minutes spent working together. The green line, which is the number of contacts, are substantially greater than those of other infant toddlers providers in our state, which is the red line. The instructional coaching and technical assistance is not just for Baby Promise early educators in the classroom. Grantees support all the staff in the classroom with infants and toddlers, and that includes directors, owners, site managers, depending on the provider type. So grantee staff stay connected. Monthly instructional and business coaching are required, as well as focused childcare networks. And this dedicated time is a really important element of continuous growth and development and relationship building for everybody. When we looked into what providers and coaches were working on, these were the topics that were most tagged in the data that we reviewed. And as I've listened to the voices we're hearing today, I hear these topics reflected in their comments. System navigation, physical environments, adult-child interactions, behavior guidance, they're all represented in many of the comments that we're hearing. Another really important element of Baby Promise is provided by our talented colleagues in the Professional Learning Systems Office. My colleague Liz Zinter has implemented access to the 0 to 3 critical competencies trainings across the state for all infant toddler providers. Through this collaboration, Baby Promise providers, again, including directors, site management staff, assistant teachers, are required to participate in this high-quality infant toddler focused curriculum. Let's hear some comments about the impact of 0 to 3.
One thing that I noticed was after the 0 to 3 training, I saw more RIE practices happening in the classroom and teachers having more trust and confidence in children's abilities and not so quickly going to correct or redirect when a behavior didn't need to be. And I think that no matter how many times as a director you say that, it's different when you sit down and you have a developmental training and you really go through it and they see, oh, so really this kid is working this out and they can figure out how to do this and they're safe. And if I take that learning opportunity away from them, I'm actually not supporting them.
So why do we need Baby Promise? Well, you've heard about what the program offers, where it is, who it serves, and how the money is spent. A reminder about why we need it. First, because we know that the first 3 years of life are critical. There's clear evidence that early educational interventions can provide long-lasting effects into adult life. Multiple studies show early experiences of childcare can improve later outcomes in cognitive, language, and social development. Second, thankfully, public funding plays a major role in creating Oregon's childcare supply, especially for preschoolers. 29% of preschool slots are publicly funded, whereas only 10% of infant toddler slots are publicly funded. And when we look at who has access to these slots, the difference is even greater. Over 100% of eligible preschool-age children have access to a publicly funded preschool slot, which is great, compared to only 13% of eligible infants and toddlers. Third, infant and toddler care in Oregon is dramatically harder to access than preschool care. Nearly the entire state is a childcare desert for ages 0 to 2, while preschool access has improved significantly, leaving far fewer counties classified as deserts. What you see here on the left is access for 0 to 2, and on the right, access for 3 to 5. And those darker green areas are counties denoted as childcare deserts. Finally, it's really important because it's expensive. And you know this, the needs of infants and toddlers are different than the needs of preschool children. Babies need different environments, different care routines, different equipment, different sustenance, and they need developmentally appropriate education from qualified early educators. And maybe most obvious, they require a higher ratio of adults to children, significantly increasing the cost for providers. The Baby Promise model can provide all of these supports in local mixed delivery settings, making it easier for providers to engage and grow and develop their instructional knowledge and their business acumen. So what are we learning about instruction? Baby Promise classrooms are required to be observed and assessed every single year. For the past 2 years, we've used the environmental rating scales tool, and we're going to be doing another round this summer using ERS. So next year, I'll have some more data to share with you. Across the tool, Baby Promise providers consistently have moderately high scores for language and books and interactions, even higher scores for use of books and for supervision of play and learning in interactions. As you might remember, behavior guidance, adult-child interactions were 2 of the very topics in the list that providers engaged in training and technical assistance around. Now, I want to be clear. We know that these observations are one snapshot in time. They do not tell the whole story of program and instructional quality. And I'm thrilled to see language, peer interactions, and play in the high score buckets. This makes a lot of sense. We've been talking about literacy as a state for some time now, and I hope we never stop talking about the value of play. Lower scores in schedules, transitions, and health make sense too. As we've noted, caring for infants and toddlers is not the same as caring for preschoolers. If you've ever tried to transition a group of toddlers, you know what I'm talking about. If you've ever tried to or watched somebody feed 3 babies while the aide steps out of the room, it's a very different situation. And these are infant toddler challenges that our grantee staff have been working to address with the providers that they are working with. So let's hear some feedback about these observations from 2 different centers.
It was interesting to see the breakdown of how they score classrooms, classroom materials, communications with children, the food they eat, literally everything in your whole program. And when you do day-to-day operations, I don't think you think too much about all those details as you're just in survival mode, and you're making sure your teachers have everything they need, all the children's needs are met, all the families are happy and satisfied, and then your outside partnerships that you don't really have the extra time to look around and go, oh, what would this score? Is this really appropriate in this area? So it was nice. First time around, it was a little nerve-wracking. Second time around, it was a lot easier to understand. But it's definitely great feedback, and I'm excited to go for this year again.
So one teacher said, oh, I want to work on more transitions with music. And he worked on that goal for like 6 months. We had to have indoor recess, because it was so cold, we couldn't go outside. And so he had all the kids, like he has this little train whistle, and he blows the train whistle, and they all have musical instruments, and they go through all the classrooms like a snake, and they go through the hallway, and then they do it again. And so that's the type of goal setting that we do, because we have like our big picture, like this is what I want as the director. And then you have, okay, this is what our classroom quantitatively needs to achieve. And then, okay, these are the qualitative things we're going to do to meet that quantitative rating. So we're very tiered, if that answers it.
And a quick word about Spark. Baby Promise has made Spark a priority for providers since the program began. Providers have been required to maintain a rating in Spark, and the data on this slide shows that more Baby Promise providers are working on getting and keeping those ratings than their counterparts who are also serving infants and toddlers. This tells us that our most vulnerable population has more access to high-quality infant and toddler care, and that this is a population that may not have had access to this care before, and now they do. So what's next? We're going to keep growing. Infant and toddler care is a strategic goal for the Department of Early Learning and Care, and Baby Promise is trundling right along. We're working with our OSU partners on a research study that examines how Baby Promise will shape families' access to care that meets their needs, and to what extent does Baby Promise address the supply of infant toddler care across Oregon. This study will provide some really important information from families and providers about access. We look forward to the next biennium, growing with our sister programs when we can, and serving the unique needs of each region in Oregon collaboratively with partners. The model really works for families. Grantees help families find a provider that works for them in this fully funded, full-time, full support package that's designed to lift the burden from families and elevate the quality of care. Here's 2 final thoughts, first from a parent and then from a provider.
Parent Ryan Smith told us that, quote, Baby Promise has made it possible for our family to live a somewhat normal lifestyle with having twin baby girls. There would be absolutely no way to afford daycare for our girls. I have been a hairdresser locally for 18 years this year in Central Oregon, and I make a good living doing so with competitive wages at great clips. However, the cost of living in Central Oregon is so high that we barely make it paycheck to paycheck as it is. No time for a financial crisis. With Baby Promise, we can sleep at night knowing our baby girls are safely looked after and given a wonderful chance to learn and grow at Bolden Rogan Academy. If it wasn't for this program and the people that make it possible, I don't even think I would be half the mother I am striving to be today. I'd be stressed, scared, depressed, and tired, and under-supported. So I greatly appreciate the love and support and care that we receive through Baby Promise, end quote.
With Baby Promise's support and funding, that helped me kind of ease me, and it allowed me to be able to provide a safe, a good space for the infants. So, and it just put me at ease because I was able to provide that care for them. And before, I would just kind of fudge through it, but with all the systems in place that Baby Promise provides, it allowed me to do care for the infants, and then also keep doing those, keep bringing those infants in, and keep those spots available and filled.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can, and I'll find answers to the ones I can't. I will stop sharing.
Questions for Mady? I loved the presentation, by the way. It was so nice to hear from providers. Suvane.
Hi, Mady. I'm super distracted, but that was the best program presentation we've ever gotten. That was amazing. That's all I wanted to say. I loved how you integrated the voices and like the sound clips. Clearly, a lot of work went into that, and you don't. And so fantastic. I guess I do have a question. That you were actually showing some really interesting data in terms of you gave the caveat of this is just a snapshot. It's not showing absolute quality and things like that. Like, I think this is a question that all the programs need to think about is like how can we get to the robust data picture that we need? Do you see that coming, or do you see that as like a challenge that you're not quite sure how to handle yet?
I think that getting to these robust pictures, the challenge is that we're all doing it together, and that takes some time. And part of it is really understanding the situation as it really is in all the places that it is. So from our small family home providers in a rural place to a large center to an urban, it's understanding the reality of where everybody is, and then really focusing on that collaborative piece where everybody's voice is there and we're working together. These programs are required to have these observations. And so the more that we can assist our grantees to be collaborative together, especially across regions, it's amazing what they can get done. So I think that it's not so much of a challenge as it is maybe a tangle to untangle together, if that makes any sense.
Other questions or reflections for Mady? Eric.
Hi, I also want to echo Subin saying that was a great presentation. I'm really encouraged to hear the work you're doing in the areas in particular you're doing it. I do love as you said, the data and understanding the scores and measuring that. What kind of processes are going to be in place though to like if the scores are below what you want and sort of setting those targets and engaging folks to get those scores up? Will that hinder them from future grants, or I'm just curious on how that oversight is going to work?
That would never hinder them from future grants for sure, because we understand that these observations are really just one snapshot in time. And what I want to be clear about is that nobody wants scores that are low. Nobody likes that or wants that. And so what it's all about, again, is lifting all boats. It's working with the grantee staff. It's helping them to learn more about how do I coach? How do I help a program or a teacher or a site manager or an owner to understand. And I think the third piece is the other piece of that is the professional learning that's happening in the 0 to 3 classroom. I just want to make it really clear that none of this is anything I have done. This is what these grantees are doing with the people that they serve together. And that just takes time building that work together, getting everybody to have the same vision.
Robin.
Thank you, Mady. That was an amazing presentation, really clear. I always appreciate hearing from you, and this program is loved by many, myself included. I think my question might even be an Alyssa question, maybe others. When we think of what it took to get Baby Promise in Oregon and the funding and the reach that it currently has, we've been at that geographic footprint for a while. Like, what would it really take to scale? I mean, there's two things that are on my mind, which is a little bit of themes that I've heard throughout today, but one of our presenters, I don't remember if it was Pennsylvania or Virginia, that talked about Virginia, I think talked about the cost of care and like, no, go big, like say the amount that it's going to take. And when I listen to you talk about this program and hear the voices of providers saying they got the resources they had, it's like really fully supporting something so that it's funded well and parents can afford it and the kids are doing well. And that's like a real fully loaded best way to do a program. And it costs a lot and is what we want to shoot for more kids. And so how do we as a state see something like this that has federal funding? What is it going to take for us to scale it to other places? And I don't know, Alyssa, if you have thoughts, or is there anything that we could be doing to change that besides we need money?
Yeah. I mean, that is the answer. I mean, I think there's an operational question we've been wrestling with, which is because Baby Promise is solely CCDF funded, it's built on top of ERDC. And so operationally, what's the long-term vision if we were to go to scale and start to invest in, with general fund early learning account dollars? Would the actual vision be to eventually disentangle that and kind of make it a standalone like Preschool Promises or OPK, rather than built on top? So I think there's that like operational question that we've wrestled with. That would require money to backfill the ERDC investment in addition to expansion dollars. Baby Promise is already an eligible program for the early learning account. So we've got that covered. I think there's beginning to be an increased awareness of the need for infant toddler care, but I do think we're still fighting that idea that we've got people convinced about preschool. We don't have everybody on board yet about infant and toddler. And I think there's also the tension of childcare as an economic support and early childhood settings as a space for education, learning, and development. And I think sometimes those things sound like they're in conflict with one another. So I do think the council can help in terms of elevating stories, figuring out when we're talking about this work, in which lane are we talking about it as the economic? Because I think one of the beauties of early childhood, I loved Andrea's comment of like her superpower, she can bring everything back to early childhood, right? And I think that's one of the amazing things about this sector is it relates to so much, but that's also the challenge, because then it's like, well, what is it, right? Like what is the important thing? And it's like, well, it's important for everything. So yes, it's the economic and social infrastructure. And I think we still have trouble with folks understanding how it can be both, or feeling like we're just trying to find the shiny hook, and they don't necessarily believe that it's real. So I think that's where the council can maybe help, is honing in on what that message is and what that vision is, to help get the legislature and other, partners and businesses to understand the importance of infant toddler care in particular. Parents know it already, communities already know it, but we need to get those who, have more positions of power and authority to buy into that as well.
Thank you. And I was happy to see with the governor's roundtable called out to, if we are going to talk about universal preschool or anything like that in the future, we have to first address the infant toddler care, because there definitely is a balancing scale there. And so I'm glad we have Baby Promise, and thank you, Mady, for being a leader in that way and sharing with us today.
Thank you.
Other questions? I had one. This might actually be a Carrie and Alyssa question, and it may actually be a I'll get back to you question. But I was struck by the slide where you showed which providers are actually receiving are the subcontractors, right? And that there's a considerable amount of registered family. That's actually surprised me. I'm curious if like our Preschool Promise program has a similar uptake rate. And if so, that's great. If not, I'm curious if there are things that we can learn from the Baby Promise model on how we may, in particular, get like registered family care more, using these programs more frequently. So this might not be a you maybe
We
question.
can't get back to you with the specifics. I will say, just from my memory and seeing the pie charts over the years, it started closer to Baby Promise. But as the program has expanded and evolved, we've seen a much larger take up amongst school districts and ESDs in particular. So it's now shifting away. So I think one of the things that's difficult to compare is Baby Promise is nowhere near the scale of Preschool Promise, but we did see a larger portion of home-based providers when Preschool Promise was first rolling out.
I might add too, if I may, that remember that Baby Promise, those providers are required to be open 1,800 hours a year, right? So they're providing a lot of service that's meant to be for those full-time, all day, open on Christmas providers. And Preschool Promise is organized differently about that. So what I have been thinking about is maybe Baby Promise wants to find a different way to do an additional menu option that isn't so many hours for folks who don't need that many hours. And that I think is part of why registered certified families are so interested in it, because they work that many hours. So there's a couple big differences there that might be part of the story.
Mady, when a few of us visited a Baby Promise program in Bend, one of the reflections that provider had who was doing birth to 5 services was in that part of our state, there is a lot of provision of preschool. So she was intentionally reducing, not eliminating, but reducing her preschool slots, wanted to expand her infant toddler slots, and at the same time was seeing the wait list for infants to go down, but the wait list for 1-year-olds to go way up because of paid family leave. And so I just didn't know if you had additional reflections, since that was just a single program in Bend that was discussing that with us, if you are also seeing kind of other kinds of uses and where we might think about what families and providers are trying to share with us.
That's really interesting. I don't know that much about the family leave piece, but I do know that one of the things that we think about a lot is, are we flexible enough for the different kinds of deliveries? And the family home care provider who wants the infant and then can accept the toddler, the centers that have wobbler rooms or just infant rooms. And so if a slot opens up, they really only are looking for a 2-year-old. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we're trying to be really flexible about matching families with the providers that they want, because of course it's family choice first. I think one of the superpowers is that it's all in that Baby Promise team at the CCR&R. So they're right there. They're able to talk. The enrollment partner is able to talk with the family, talk with the provider. It's a fairly nimble interaction, and the way the contracted slots work, they can kind of go up and down, which allows the provider to take ownership over their own, what works for them. What do they want? How many babies do they need and want? That kind of thing, which I think is a great thing.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Mady. It was, truly A++ on the presentation. Loved it. So
Can I
And
ask, Chair Farrar, could I ask one more question of
yeah,
Maddie?
go ahead, Marie.
I was wondering, could you share, if any, what are some of the feedbacks, or how do you utilize the hubs? We had, your report was excellent, and obviously a lot of provider voice, which is great, but I know the hubs play a direct coordinating role in some of this work too. So I'm wondering how you're utilizing any feedbacks from the hubs on either, um, you know, pivots in the future, or whatever the next step is.
That's a really good question. Thank you. One of our regions, which is the South Coast, subcontracts with the hub to do their enrollment. The other two regions do the enrollment out of the CCR&R, and that's their choice. They're the grantee. That's, they get to decide how they want to do that. It works really well in the South Coast. They stay connected. They meet regularly, and it's been a really good opportunity for the folks at the hub in that region to be able to help families, who might not fit for Baby Promise, or if there's another space that's available for them. So it's working really well there. It's a great system. And they do collect some information from parents, and I can send that to this group.
Wonderful. Thank you again so much. Love it. Looking forward to the next update. And yeah, thank you for joining us. Bye-bye. All right, folks, we are going to transition now into administrative rulemaking. Gabby, do you want to set the table and let us know what we can expect, and then what the order is?
Yeah, of course. So council, for today, there is going to be a temporary vote, or an action for a temporary vote for some childcare licensing division rules. So we're going to start with CCLD. They will go ahead and preview just some background, the need for the temp rules, go through the proposed rule text, and then just kind of share the timeline for the permanent rulemaking and engagement. And then you will also be briefed on just the employment-related daycare program, which will then come back for a vote next month. So I can get slides ready, and then happy to pass it to Alicia.
Good morning. Still for 4 more minutes. Council, my name is Alicia Gardner. I am the CCLD Childcare Licensing Division Director. Here at DELC. Temporary rules. Today, I'll walk you through the purpose, as Gabby has stated. Really the topic that we're hoping to cover today with you all is related to 2 different concepts that are very similar in nature. One is called inactive status, and another is called administrative closures. I'll walk you through what those terms mean today. If we can move to the next slide. But before I do that, I just want to give you a little bit of background on why I am bringing these proposed rules to you all for a vote today. First of all, just grounding us in DELC's mission as well as our strategic plan, we are heavily focused on ensuring that all of our programs are deeply coordinated internally, as well as with licensing. Thinking about our mission, we do need to ensure that one of the first words is coordination, and these rules will bring coordination internally to DELC programs, as well as bring clarity to CCLD licensing related to a program's operational status. The other thing I wanted to flag in ways that we are supporting the mission and strategic plan in CCLD is that we are moving to have one customer service team within DELC, and that will sit within childcare licensing. So you will begin to see changes within DELC summer of 2026. We are focused on ensuring that CCLD provides that front door entrance point to DELC for customer service, and that we are working towards being foundation of quality. So when you think about a quality program, what are those basic foundational requirements that we would expect all childcare spaces to have? This is what CCLD strives to offer in our state systems. Lastly, one thing that we hold to be true is that licensing data informs eligibility to receive public funds. So, for example, we want to ensure that there are children in care. When we see that there are no children in care, we are ensuring that we have that data across DELC so that we know that the public funds are being used accurately and ensuring that we are coordinating that data to becoming a well-functioning early learning system. Next slide. So here's the issue that we have today, and we'll move into what the rules will attempt to solve. The reality of childcare licensing in the fieldwork that we do today is that programs do sometimes stop operating and then they do not inform us of that fact. This happens often with smaller home-based care in particular, where perhaps a provider moves and doesn't tell us. Sometimes individuals or programs in commercial settings are evicted and then we have no way of contacting them. Sometimes providers are unable to get children enrolled for a very long time, even though they hold an active license. And so we show up and we're unable to do our required monitoring visits when that occurs. And sometimes we're just not even able to contact the provider at all. This leads into potential missed required inspections, multiple visit attempts, which leads to administrative inefficiencies for CCLD. It may also lead to payments being provided when care is not being provided. And it can also lead to confusion for families and providers, just who is operational and who isn't. They're really looking at that license status of active to understand that information. Next slide. So our proposed solution is quite simple on the provider's end. What we are simply asking and requiring providers to do is to let us know when they intend to stop operating, which is defined as no children in care for 30 days or more. This can be done through a simple email. We have also a form that we have developed that is easy to fill out. Or if we show up on a visit and those children are not in care, we will document that and that will count and suffice for that. So we're trying to make this as easy as possible on providers so it is not administratively burdensome. But this simple act of telling us whether they're not planning on operating for 30 days or more will create tremendous efficiency within our systems to be able to know where children are really being cared for and where they are not, and build efficiency so we don't have to go out multiple times for visits or use a lot of travel time to only show up and children are not present. The second solution is a legal action, and it is a formal action taken by DELC to close a license when there is clear evidence that the provider is no longer operating. So this could include confirmed closure events such as an eviction or repeated unsuccessful attempts to contact the provider, or if the provider has not been providing active care for 6 months or more. This is a legal action which will have hearing rights associated, and a provider will have a right to request a hearing. Although we don't anticipate many hearing requests on this because our intention is to use this when we cannot get a hold of the provider. And typically speaking, when that occurs, there is another provider waiting to occupy that space. Very often we are in conversations with landlords who are looking to bring in a new tenant in relation to an eviction that has occurred, and we are unable to license that new program because there is an active license being held there already. So this will create an efficiency where we can administratively close the license if the provider happens to respond to our legal notice. Then that's great because we've been trying to get a hold of them to sign a voluntary closure notice. And so the goal here is to create a legal pathway for us to clean up our system, but also give providers an opportunity, one last final opportunity to engage with us before we move with that action. Next slide. Generally, here's a rule text summary. Our proposal is to include this in the general rules for all childcare facilities rule set. So this will impact all licensed childcare programs as well as regulated subsidy facilities. So if they are not caring for children 30 days or more, we would want them to give us a notice that they are inactive. This rule set defines the key terms that I've went over with you today, such as administrative closure, inactive status, what does license abandonment mean, and what is our definition for an incomplete visit. It establishes DELC processes and actions for inactive status as well as administrative closure, and it maintains DELC's authority to, during that inactive status periods, to still do investigations on complaints, issue findings. There are certain regulatory requirements that will still apply during inactive status, such as CBR enrollment. And so just ensuring that it is well documented that there while they are inactive, there are still certain rules that apply while they hold the active license. Next slide. Under that inactive status section, yes, there we are. There is some of the rule text summary here is just that this will allow DELC to pause public funding payments when a license is inactive or administratively closed. It does set the notification requirement for providers to tell us when they are inactive, which is defined as a period of 30 days or more when children are not being served. It specifies program requirements, as I stated, and then it identifies DELC actions after inactive status begins, such as we will make a note in our system and ensure that subsidy programs within DELC are also notified. Next slide. In relation to administrative closure and license abandonment, this will establish circumstances when a DELC can administratively close a license. It sets criteria for when a license is considered abandoned. It includes required agency communication and efforts to contact the provider before taking this action. And it does specify that there is hearing rights included and that a license may be reopened. So I want to flag that this is not a punitive action on CCLD. This is not CCLD's punitive action when we cannot get a hold of providers. They may reapply anytime after an administrative closure. So there is the ability to always contact us and start that process up again. Next slide. So high level, here are some of the important impacts that these rules will bring to DELC. It will support the department's ability to ensure programs are operating and available to serve children within our data that we are sharing. It will promote accurate alignment between the services provided and public funding. It does create a clear pathway for programs that temporarily pause care and give us more clarity on how to approach our procedures with those kinds of programs. And then it does establish consistent expectations for program status and communication with the department. Next slide. So this is just a quick timeline related to the permanent rulemaking process. So we do intend to hold a RAC Rules Advisory Committee summer 2026. Public comment and hearing period would also be in the summer, and then proposed adoption where we will revisit the council again on this topic would be in September of 2026. And that is what I have for you all today.
Questions for Alicia?
Alicia, I just wondered if you had a sense for the scope. I know you outlined the issues and a sense for the scope of the problem. Is this 10 programs a year you're anticipating, 100 programs a year you're anticipating? And then it also sounds, so that's part one. Part two is, it sounds like part of this too is around the fiscal responsibility. And so I wondered if you had any sense for, what you're anticipating on the fiscal side.
Yeah, great questions. So I think the scope, I don't have direct data or numbers to share with you, unfortunately, but I can say that this is a very common problem that we run into very often in CCLD. There's just been this long-standing pain point where when providers leave the system and don't tell us, we are stuck then with an active license that we can't do anything with. And then the second, and that happens often. And so the other part of and component of this is we don't have good clarifying guidance for providers and licensors currently related to what to do when a program doesn't, like, they hold an active license, but they're not actively caring for children. So do we do the visit or don't we do the visit? Or how often are we checking in with them? Those kinds of procedures. So this will help set that foundation so that we can get everybody on the same page of how we approach these programs that are looking to get children enrolled, but don't yet have them, or they're taking a break. Sometimes providers will call us and tell us, I'm going to leave the country for 2 months. And, at that time, what we would do with this tool is put them on an active status. They can contact us when they return, and then the system will get up and running again. That helps our licensing team first and foremost know not to go monitor that program when they're not there. And similarly, this will account for summer programs. So there's programs that only operate fall to spring. So there's quite a few programs in our system that operate that way as well. So this really is a very important tool for us just to get clear on the data of how many programs are inactive versus actually caring for children, and then how many are not, right? So and then the second question related to like the program integrity, fiscal integrity side of things is that this actually is a support to providers to ensure that there are no inaccurate payments, because when they tell us that they are inactive, this creates an upstream control where we actually don't provide payments during that time. And so this is provider initiated. It's not DELC controlled. So a provider is responsible to tell us, but that ultimately helps them in that DELC will then control the payment stream through that one notification. So ultimately will help the system overall through an upstream control where we are ensuring, that we are having some stewardship over funds through this very simple process.
Katie.
Thanks. Your second answer was really related to mine. Is when I was listening to you go through these, I was wondering, has it been a problem, trying to phrase this correctly, that we've been making payments when somebody hasn't been operating? So I'm assuming those checks and balances already are happening to everybody's satisfaction, but this just streamlines it.
It streamlines it. That is correct. And in part because, like I said in the beginning, thinking about like our mission and strategic plan in DELC, when we bring over this big program, ERDC, there's still foundations to be laid within how licensing and the ERDC program work together now that we're under one agency. So this lays one of those foundational efforts where we are sharing better data with one another through this data collection point that hasn't existed before. And so while there are systems in place, this one is a more intentional communication point between licensing and ERDC that is provider initiated.
Thanks.
Other questions for Alicia? If not, could I get a motion to adopt the temporary rule language?
And I think it'll
Sure. I move to adopt proposed temporary rule language amendments dated April 22nd, 2026 for temporary Oregon administrative rule change to OAR 414-075-0400.
Is there a second? Was that Peter?
Yep.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Gabby, could you call the roll, please?
Of course. Okay. Chair Farrar Campbell?
Yes.
Katie Brooks,
Yes.
Peter Buckley,
Yes.
Robin Hill Dunbar,
Yes.
Eric Hunter, oh, I think Eric might have hopped off, so we'll mark him as excused. Dr. Peg Miller,
Yes.
Subin O.
Yes.
I know Ruby Ramirez did leave for the vote, so she is excused, and Marie Simons.
Yes.
Perfect. The motion passes. Thank you all.
Thank you. And then do you want to introduce the next
Yes, so now we have just a briefing or notice on some employment-related daycare rules and just the rulemaking process that is currently going on for that. And with that, I will pass it to Kelsey Culbertson.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Kelsey Culbertson. I'm the Early Learning and Child Care Administration Manager with the Department of Early Learning and Care, and the ERDC program is one of the programs that I get to work closely with. So we have 10 rules that we're proposing to update. Most of them are not any substantial change. It's just making some minor changes that are going to help us with our transition to the ELM system, and then a couple of other points, and I'll make sure I talk over each of those. But here's the list of the proposed rule changes that we have. We can go to the next slide in just a moment. We have already held our Rules Advisory Committee on April 15th, and then today we're presenting here to you, and then we are still open for public comment right now. So we may still hear more about some of these changes in the coming days. Okay, so this is our first one. And here we have added the definition of disenrollment for payment purposes. So this means that if they've gone a calendar month without attendance, a child can no longer be billed for within that program, and it has been a current practice, and this change is just adding clarity to that practice. And it's adding the Oregon ELMS definition as we're moving into operations with Oregon ELMS this coming summer. So again, just that clarity update there. And there's no fiscal impacts here. Moving on to, sorry, go ahead. It's fine, Gabby. Moving on to our waitlist for ERDC here. So we had actually brought this to you guys initially back in October, and then we were waiting for that statutory authority to make this change. So this is the change that gives us the ability to pause bypasses independently. Current status has been all bypasses on or all bypasses off. This allows us to, should the need come, take a more nuanced approach to turning individual bypasses on or off if we need to use that lever. Currently, we do not have any plans to utilize that, but this is just that rule language that is allowing us the ability to turn bypasses on and off independently. We can keep going to the next slide there. The certification period here. This is not a substantial change. It's clarifying if a family reports that they have more than $1 million in resources that we can close them mid-certification. This was updated. Sorry, we're updating this language for more clarity. This was initially brought forward as a federal requirement in 2014. So this is just making the language ideally more clear for people to understand what that income limitation is with that $1 million. Okay. Now, this is the requirement to establish a childcare need for authorization hours. This has been updated to clarify scenarios in which a categorically eligible family may need additional hours in childcare. And our categorically eligible populations currently are families with child welfare and our TANF populations. So there was previously only one restriction on increasing childcare hours for categorically eligible families, and we cannot increase hours to full-time just for the purpose of the parent obtaining a full-time childcare slot. This language adds in restrictions that we cannot increase hours for overnight care when the parent isn't participating in overnight activities or due to inconvenient drop-off or pickup times. It's just providing more clarity around what that rule language is. And then the verification requirements. This change is going to allow another way for families to validate that they are on medical leave. So it is just reducing barriers to being able to report that they are on medical leave to ERDC. Okay, so our specific financial requirements here, it's taking into consideration a new payment type. The military transitional compensation income is going to be treated as unearned income for ERDC. It's a new program where a spouse and a child of a military member can receive cash payments due to dependent abuse. And this rule is also being updated to clarify that all payments received through the Youth Experiencing Homeless program are excluded for ERDC. There was a name change recently, so this is just clarifying that all payments for the Youth Experiencing Homeless program will be excluded. So it provides clarity and ease of potential future name changes to not have to adjust the rule each time there is that name change within the program specifically. Okay, and then with our requirement to make copay or satisfactory arrangements, this is a change where it is saying that anywhere in rule it says billing form, it's being changed to just say billing, which is providing us the opportunity to have not only paper billing forms, but bill through the Oregon Elms system. So this is going to allow us to have multiple payment billing options moving forward, which I think is an exciting change for us. And this is a child care provider eligibility standards payment. This rule is being updated again to change the billing form to billing. This is just that second piece there. And this is, again, providing us the opportunity to be inclusive of the billing options that are being created with the go live of the Oregon Elms system. And this is a repeal of COVID era provider payments that are no longer happening. So we just need to formalize that and repeal the 414-175-0077. And then with direct provider payments, this is the most robust one. So there's three pieces that are being addressed here with this. Starting August 1st with Oregon Elms, providers will be paid at the ERDC rates, even if their private pay rates are lower. So this will allow a little bit more flexibility for our providers there. It is also allowing us, we're also removing language that is no longer correct, that non-certified centers were only paid after care was provided. So this was something that was missed in previous iterations. And so we're just updating that to current practice. And then the third thing that this is updating and changing is allowing certified family owners to be designated to receive the ERDC payments directly. This has been common practice in the program, but the OER language did not support it. So this allows providers and certified family owners to be paid based on their current business model. So those are those three pieces there. We had our RAC recently, and these are the members that were on that. We had pretty good representation around the state, as well as a really solid showing of childcare providers here because of the topics that we were discussing and the impacts that could potentially be had for them. And then this is just the timeline of those changes here. We're presenting with you guys today. We still have public hearing set to occur April 29th, and then public comment ends on May 8th. And then this will be brought back next month for a vote with the rule changes to become effective as of June 1st, 2026.
Are there questions for Kelsey? Okay, thank you all. I will just say I am excited about the specific change about allowing the providers to receive the full amount. And I think in a lot of rural places, providers are trying to meet families where they are. And so they have been, I think, leaving some ERDC funds on the table because they're trying to meet, where they think parents are going to be able to pay, especially in rural communities. And so I think this is going to be a great change, and I'm excited about it. So other questions or reflections for Kelsey? If not, we will see you next meeting, Kelsey, to actually vote. And that is the end of our agenda, folks. So does anybody have anything for the good of the order before we adjourn? Give folks a minute. If not, it is 12:23 and we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you next time.